Well, I just briefly want to welcome all of you who are here for the accountability meeting and also for our Pathways to Success meeting. I'm Julie Eklund, the Director of Planning at the Coordinating Board. We hold these accountability meetings once or twice a year, and today we have all of the community and the state and technical college representatives with us who are on the accountability, who are members of the accountability peer groups. So welcome to all of you, and now I'm going to hand the mic over to Judy Laredo, who's our Assistant Commissioner in our P16 Initiatives Division. And again, I just want to say, we hear you all calling in, but if you could please put your phones on mute unless you're going to ask a question, and do not put your phone on hold. Thank you very much. Here's Judy.
Good morning. It's really a delight to be here. We're all facing challenging times, but at the same time, I think those challenges are quite exciting as we look to the future and all the changes that may be occurring. I don't need to tell you that closing the gaps is not anything new on anybody's radar screen. It is, I remember when I got here 5 years ago, 2015 seemed like light years away, and it's not light years away, it's around the corner. Quite close, much closer than I realized. I think that all of us realize. And that's the purpose of our meeting today. I thank Dr. Eklund for allowing us to be part of this discussion, because we at the agency have been engaged in very deep discussion over the last weeks around closing the gaps and the data. Where are we today, and how are we going to get to those magical numbers? Because we were doing quite well. Things were moving quite fast, and something happened because our economy got better, and so our enrollments are slowing. But that doesn't stop the legislature from looking very carefully at what's occurring. And so we, as our charge is to look at closing the gaps and to make this a reality, we thought this might be a good venue to come to you today to put some information before you, but at the same time to ask you some really important questions, questions that we've generated. Certainly there could be many others that you might want to put on the table, but it gives us feedback for how we need to move forward, not only in helping you, but maybe in getting you to think about your institutions and where you might need to go back and do some work in order to help us get to that 2015 date. There are some key people here at the table who are with me that have been working very closely on this effort. To my left is Dr. Gary Tomerlin, Deputy Assistant Commissioner for the Community and Technical Colleges in our WAR division called Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Research. You know, we got a new name not too long ago, and our committee of the board is called CAUSE. And so my division and Dr. Tomerlin's divisions are joint in terms of our work. And of course, you know Dr. Eklund, who is Director of Planning in the Division of Planning and Accountability. And Jane Caldwell, to my immediate left, is the Director of Grant Special Programs in the Division of Business and Support Services. That's the money area. That's that financial aid side of the house. And Ms. Lynn Kenyon, Assistant Director of Grants and Special Programs in the Division of Business and Support Services. Mr. Jose Rios, who has also been a member of this team, who's the Director of Community and Technical Colleges in the WAR division, has also been working very closely with us, but he is at a meeting today, and so that's why he was not able to join us. So what I'm going to do, and Dr. Bockerman is also with us. She has. And I wasn't part of that. Yeah, she wasn't part of this group. But let me tell you, when we need to go to her for data, especially when you're looking at achieving the dreams and all this work, that's who we can go and knock on her door. But this is a group that has come together over the last few weeks to come to you to pose some very important, thought-provoking questions. And to begin that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eklund.
Thank you, Dr. Laredo. And I want to spend just a little bit of time this morning setting the stage for our discussion. Most of you who are here with us in the building today are folks who work in institutional research work closely with data, and you understand why data and numbers are a very important part of this discussion, because they can certainly inform the discussion we're going to have about how we're going to get to our Closing the Gaps goals. Everyone, I believe, was emailed handouts for the meeting, and I'm going to go through them in the order that I emailed them. The first thing that I want you to look at is, I believe, was number 3. For those of you who are back at your institutions, it's the number 3 handout. What we sent you was a very long and complicated spreadsheet, and it's information that's available online, but it's information that we put together in one place for the meeting, and it was finished yesterday morning, which is why you got the full version. But I've taken the liberty to come up with a shorter version and just put some example colleges up there so that I can walk you through what's important in the spreadsheet, what you should be thinking about. We are going to be adding to this in the next week or so. We will send you a new version, and it will be a pared down version that I hope is easier for you to use. But basically what we did is we took the information that you report to us for your institutional Closing the Gaps targets. We took the information that we gather as part of the enrollment forecast, and I think many of you who are here participate in that. And that's an activity that we do every year to forecast what enrollment is going to look like at institutions if the same trends continue that have continued in the past. And this year, the enrollment forecast showed many institutions to be down in terms of enrollment, because that has to do with the fact that we had drops in enrollment at community colleges in the fall. Also, we do something called an allocation, a Closing the Gaps allocation. Doug Bond in our office produces this, and basically what he does, he uses the term raking, which I guess is the official statistical term, but he basically started with the fact that we need 1,650,000 students enrolled by 2015 to reach our Closing the Gaps goals, and that's fall 2015. And then he took that information and backed those numbers using population projections, information about current enrollments, about breakouts in populations in your various service areas. He backed that number into an individual institution number for each institution. Now, the numbers on this spreadsheet are for the allocation that he did in 2010. But he's going to be doing a new one. We had some new population figures come out from the Texas State Data Center, some new projections just in the last few months. So he's working on a new allocation, but we wanted to show you what's coming and give you what we have now. So basically, the allocations that have been online for years, that number is included for each institution. The forecast number is included for each institution. We put the fall 2012 enrollment there for each institution. And then what we are going to create for you, that I created in the handout and what you see on the screen for those of you who are here, is we're going to look at a ratio that shows the enrollment divided by what the allocation is for your institution. So an institution should be striving to get to 1.0 for that. Now, some of our institutions actually are enrolling as many students as we're asking them to by 2015. We have a few. This does not mean that you can stop. This does not mean that you need to drop students if in particular areas you're ahead of where we've allocated your institution. But what it means is that you're on track, and we encourage you to continue with that. Continue to grow your enrollment. But I think this information is helpful, and if you look at the shaded boxes where I have done that allocation, and also when you look at your target to the allocation, those shaded boxes are institutions that are under 0.95 in the ratio. It really will give you a sense of where you are versus where you need to be. If we're going to get to Closing the Gaps. So it's again, this is a tool to use. This is not an exact science, but it's it's an exercise that we go through and we have gone through to try to allocate to the institutions what their enrollments need to be generally if we're going to get to the Closing the Gaps goal. So I hope that that helps a little bit to look at it in a shorter version here, to look at your fall enrollments, to look at what our allocation is for where you need to be by 2015, to look at those ratios, and also to look at the institutional targets. Some institutions' targets are very robust. When you were asked to do the targets, you're asked to stretch. Folks finished, the last time we asked you to do the targets was this fall. But we also asked you to be realistic. And when you look at the information for Hispanic students, I think institutions were realistic with their targets. But what this illustrates, I think one of the key points to take away from this data is that we have a long way to go with Hispanic enrollments if we're going to reach our Closing the Gaps targets for Hispanic students. So if you look at that under Hispanic, if you look at the THECB enrollment divided by allocation, you'll see that institutions, they're not close to where they need to be from the current enrollment to where we're saying we need institutions to be if we're going to close the gaps. So I wanted to present that to you today and to let you know we're going to be sending an update. It will include the new allocations. So for those of you who work in data, please be ready to have it. We hope it's helpful to you. Basically, we've just gathered some resources from different things that we've done that have been available all along, but we've gathered them together in one place for you to look at. We did not include, we do have the targets for all of the for all of the ethnicities. We have it for white students, for African American students, but I just included in this example the Hispanic students because I think that's really a takeaway that we want to bring. We're actually doing very well with African American students in some areas. Obviously, if you're beyond where your allocations were set, that's a very good thing, and we want you to continue to be there. But do keep in mind we do have some some very strong gender differences in our African American community in terms of enrollment. So you might want to look at the differences in terms of male and female enrollment for that community, as well as for all of our race ethnicity groups, because there are some differences there. Okay, so I hope that's helpful, and I'd be happy to answer questions about that in a few minutes, but I want to quickly go through a PowerPoint presentation that includes our enrollment analysis. And for those of you who are joining us, please be sure to mute your phone, but don't put it on hold. We're very happy to have you join us. Most of these slides are from an enrollment analysis that was, there we go.
I think
guess
someone
I didn't say
has
it fast enough. I believe we can put ours on mute so people can't ask questions, but it'll, okay, that's good. Thank you very much. This actually, the enrollment analysis, many of these slides were originally done for a board meeting, actually a board committee meeting that was done late last fall. But I wanted to, again, set the stage for our discussion today. So I'm going to go through this quickly. Many of you have seen this before, but just to show you some of the work that we've been doing in the planning and accountability section to look at the data related to enrollment, to try to understand what's been happening with our data, especially over the last couple of years. Okay. We've looked at dual credit. We've looked at first-time entering students. We've looked at persistence and stopouts. We're trying to understand where the decline was, what are some of the factors that have contributed to that. And again, as I mentioned before, we've taken a look at the new population projections. Next slide. And what many of you have probably heard, and you're probably seeing it on your campuses, is that where we're seeing the biggest decline is at public two-year colleges, at the community and technical colleges. You can see all of the other categories are up, though some of them have slowed considerably in terms of their growth, but we were down over 20,000 students this past fall from the prior fall. Next slide. So here's line graph which shows where we are, where we need to be. You can see we were really ahead of the trend line, and now we're slowing down, and it's very important for us to add those additional 90,000 students in the next 3 years, and that is one of the key reasons we're all here today. I just wanted to show that data also for Hispanic enrollment, since we were talking about how important that is. You can see that we have accelerated the trend line from 2010 onward, in order to get to where we need to be for Hispanic enrollment, and we're, we really have a lot to do over the next few years if we're going to get there. Okay, next slide. This shows changes in enrollment by region. Might be helpful for those of you especially who are in regions that have lost a lot of students in the last fall. Next slide. We're going to talk about some of these factors in our discussion today, and if we need to go back to this slide, we can. But there's several things we've thought about, and we're really looking forward to getting your comments today, your feedback about what's happening at your institutions. Next slide. Okay, we understand that there's a relationship between the economy and enrollments, and we understand that at two-year colleges often that relationship is most obvious, most clear. And this slide shows that you can see as unemployment dropped, we've seen our enrollments drop. Okay, but there's more to it. We've also had a lot of policy changes. One of the reasons we have financial aid folks with us here today is we want to spend some time talking about changes in financial aid and related to funding and tuition that may have impacted your enrollments over the last year or so. We want to talk a little bit about meningitis, though it's our understanding that the effects of that have slowed somewhat in terms of the legislation related to the meningitis vaccine. Okay, this is dual credit enrollment, and that has gone up. So even though we've seen slowing in other areas, dual credit has gone up, which suggests that it's our non-dual credit students where we're seeing the biggest drops. Was there a question? No. Okay. This is just some, again, general information about what we saw. We are up 3,900 students in terms of our dual credit enrollments, but down 5,000 in first time entering. We just last week got from the Texas Education Agency, or it might have been the week before, their high school graduate data. So we were able to look at the 2012 high school graduates and track their enrollments into higher education. And not surprisingly, since we'd already seen the enrollment data for fall, our enrollments direct from high school to college are down 1%. So I think they were at 50.9 for the last year of graduating, high school graduating classes enrolling in the fall, and now we're at 49.9. So we've seen a full percentage point drop there. And I just heard that the external website is down. So if that's information that someone can let our technical people know, that would be... Oh, okay. So a ticket has been submitted. So we might just have folks right now who can hear us. Fortunately, you do have all those handouts that were mailed, and hopefully we'll get the website back up so you'll have a visual. It could be that too many folks were logging in at once for some reason. I'm not sure why it's down, but we have people working on that. Thank you for your understanding. We have our first-time entering students are down 5,000, and I'll try to articulate what we're seeing on the screen for those of you who don't have the screen right now. First-year persistence, that's students who are still enrolled the following fall. That was down. One of the positive things we've seen is that the time to degree has decreased. And, although it's important for us to reach our participation goals, we understand that one of an important initiative at the coordinating board is to get students through in a timely fashion, because it's taking students, as you know, a lot longer than we feel it should. So we've actually seen decreases in time to degree, and those are going to take students out of the participation pool faster than it has in the past. So that's a positive thing. We'd like to continue to see that, but again, we still think we need to have, we need to reach our goals in terms of enrollment while reducing the time students take to complete their degrees.
I think we need to add also, when you say that it pulls them out of the participation side, remember we also have a goal on that persistent success side of 230,000 students completing by 2015 certificates, associates, and four-year degrees. So that side is still important as well.
Yes, that's critical. We're going to talk about that today, and we are 13,500 degrees per year short of our goal. And so very much within reach, but very important that we reach it. And we're going to be spending some time talking about how we can help you to get the information you need to hopefully get students to complete those degrees, especially those students who have stopped out. Okay, next slide. And just briefly, the Texas State Data Center does population projections. They do different population scenarios. What this slide shows is information from the 2010 census about our actual population in Texas, and it shows how different that population is from what they were projecting previously. So the earlier projections are what we used for our Closing the Gaps projections. And you'll see that the biggest difference here is that there are almost 400,000 fewer Hispanic students, Hispanic members of the population, this is the overall population, in 2010 than we were predicting, than those early population projections that came from the data center were predicting. So I think that what you see for the prior projection, those were done in 2007. So we have seen some changes in the population, and those new allocations will incorporate those changes when we give you those new Closing the Gaps allocations. Okay, and this is the last slide. I did want to, as I mentioned, we do have the high school graduates now, and just yesterday we put online the data that shows by ISD and high school where students are enrolling in higher education. So that, and we've got the statewide data there too. So I just so you're aware, on the website in our high school to college area, that new data was just posted. In fact, I don't think we've got the tag up in latest news yet because it just happened, but it is available. Flex entry students, we had told the board in the fall that we were going to look at flex entry students, and we're going to spend some time talking about that this morning, because we've looked at data for flex entry students. It was back in 2000 when the Closing the Gaps goals were developed and when the plan was developed, we had a very small population of students who were flex entry. That has grown by about 200%. Versus, we're up a little over 50% in terms of our overall participation. We think that's becoming a much more common population, especially at community and technical colleges, and so that is a number we may be looking at as we look towards Closing the Gaps. So our goal, we still are 90,000 students short using our traditional methodology, but we may add some categories to that to look at other student populations and probably flex, because that's a population that, again, was very small when we started this process, but it clearly includes a lot of our enrollments. And when I talk about it growing by 200%, those are students who were flex, who were not enrolled otherwise in the fall as a traditional student. So we took the students who were reported as flex, who do not show up reported by the census date as a traditional student. So that's why we had to wait till spring to do it, so we could look at those flex entries in spring, for those of you who understand reporting, and see how many students were there in the fall. We unduplicated across our fall CBM 001 records, and we found a large number of students, over 50,000. Okay, so thank you very much. And then the final thing I want to do is I just want to point out a couple of handouts that I gave you. I'm not going to spend time on them. Well, in fact, first I see I've got Closing the Gaps dashboard. I just wanted to let you know the dashboard was also just updated this week. We've been working very diligently to get information available to all of you. This is a very important initiative, and we want you to have the data that you need to go back to your campuses and think about enrollment and understand what's going on in terms of enrollment. So if you go to the Closing the Gaps dashboard, well, we can't right now, but I think most of you know where it is. It's on the Higher Ed Data website, and I will show you this afternoon because I'm going to walk through some new things that we have on the data website. But we do, on that Closing the Gaps dashboard, we do have that information there. And then I'm just going to have you open I think it's 5, 6, and 7, just to give you an idea, and mostly I think this is for the enrollment managers out there who are listening and the student personnel folks, many of you who have joined us via the conference call. I wanted you to be able to see the type of data that's available through the accountability system, and the fact there are many, many different ways to show data, to show trend data, simply by going into the interactive access in the accountability system. So here's an example of persistence data. That first we have the TSTCs on top, and then all of the community colleges, so it shows 3-year trends. You can go all the way back to 2000 with almost all of the data that's in the accountability system. You can ask for just selected colleges if you want to compare to accountability peer colleges. So this is very useful information to look at as you're looking at enrollments and thinking about enrollment changes. And then the next two are just two additional pieces of information related to persistence and success. So I think number 6, we've got some information here about degrees awarded. And again, as Dr. Laredo emphasized, our success goals are very important. And this has information about degrees awarded over time. And then the final file is information about transfer. And all of these files, you can go in and ask for an Excel file and make the comparison. So it's very easy to do, and and we slice and dice the data in many, many different ways. So it's a great tool. So thank you all very much. I hope I've set the stage for the discussion, and I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Laredo.
We're going to do an e-poll so we can get you involved in this discussion. And so if you will notice that the directions are being posted up on the screen, but for those if there's still trouble and you're not able to see them, you will be texting your answers to the questions we're going to pose to 22333. And that's the number that's listed up there on the visual. For those of you out there in cyberspace, and of course those of you here in the room can see it. And we have a set of questions that we're going to ask you to respond to. And
could you please repeat the code?
Yes, the code number is 22333. If your phone has the capability of texting, that is the mode that you will use in order to respond to the questions.
I wanted to point out that's also on the agenda that was emailed to everyone yesterday. So
it's on your...
And I believe it was the number 2 item that was sent you in the handouts. Thank you.
The question that is being posed, in case you can't see it out there, it says, and you have it on your agenda, the first question, are you anticipating an increase in fall 2013 enrollment at your institution? If the answer is no, you will be texting CTG1, and it's not case sensitive, so you don't have to do it in capital letters. You can do it in small letters. If your answer is yes, it will be CTG2. Again, the question, are you anticipating an increase in fall 2013 enrollment? You can see right now we're about half and half. The second question. Okay. I can't see it.
People are still in.
Okay.
We're up to 27 results.
Again, you text the number 22333, and then you enter no CTG1 if there's no increase anticipated, and if you do, it's CTG2. Closing the gap. Are they still coming through, Mary?
What's the number now?
Are you all responding also in the room? Okay. Let's go to the second question, I guess. No, they're still doing.
I feel like NASCAR or something.
That's like that little game when you go to the different amusement parks and you see the little man going up the hill.
For those of you who are listening and can't see the results, we're at 50-50 right now.
Send their email if they can.
Up, but just went up to 51% for no and down to
For those of you-
49% for yes.
For those of you in the outside world that are listening in, if you're looking at your agenda, right in the middle of your agenda, it's got the e-poll phone number or the text number, and you've also got the questions. We're now up to 45 responses.
Per institution.
Okay, the second question that we're going to if you answered yes to that previous question, do you attribute the increase to new enrollments? If that be the case, you're going to enter CTG3. Is it because of persistence? You will enter CTG4, or if it is both new enrollments and persistence, you will enter CTG5. If you answered yes to the increase in enrollment, is it because of new enrollments, persistence, or both? And I think we had 42 responses the last time. 40? So we should, right now we're only at 14, 15 now. Yeah. That's right, it's only, well, weren't they at 50-50? Yeah, you're right. So 20 people. Well, we're almost there because we've got number 19 just
I
responded.
think we wound up at 4.
Yeah. We're almost there with the responses.
I can mute it.
Okay, we can go on to the next. If you answered no to that original question about enrollments, do you attribute the lack of an increase to fewer new enrollments, CTG6, policy changes, CTG7, or reduced persistence, CTG8? It might have been in terms of your institution. Maybe you determined that you would not allow late enrollments, changes in financial aid policies, et cetera. So we should have again about. We're just about there with the, it's interesting information, isn't it? Okay.
I wanted to let you know that your website is now up.
Thank you. Let's go to the next one. Do you still allow late registration? No is CTG 9, and yes is CTG 10. And that's assuming that you don't have students that maybe, you have courses that may start in the middle of a semester or something. That's really high for those. Pretty close.
That's kind of interesting.
Well, as you can tell, with the number that do not allow late registration anymore, and students sometimes still will come knock on your door because they haven't paid attention to the bulletin or even information that you put out. So that's very interesting. Would you identify yourself?
Don Perry with Dallas. I think that's why there's some connectivity between no late enrollment and flex entry enrollment increase.
Okay. We'd like to now go into our discussion questions, and please feel free, if by chance we stop and go to the next question, you can email your response or your thoughts, because we will be taking those. As I indicated earlier, we are meeting weekly, so we're not only analyzing our data, we will be analyzing your responses to see how we can step in and help, or what are barriers that we may need to work with in order to achieve closing the gaps and getting to these numbers. So let's begin with question number one. And for those of you out there in that cyber world, you have the questions there before you. Have you seen any patterns in student behavior or the general education environment that may be helpful in understanding the slowing institutional and statewide enrollments? This is your perception based on what you're seeing at your school. Is there some pattern in student behavior, whether it's the number of jobs they're holding, how many courses they're taking, or they're ending up dropping out because they bit off more than they could chew, and they're not able to be successful? What are you observing out there that maybe is impacting this participation and persistence side of the house? Feel free to raise your hand, or those of you out there chime in. Just make sure you identify yourself and the institution you represent. I can't believe someone out there doesn't want to say something. Have you seen a difference in the student population that's coming to your institution? Joe Carroll. Push that little red button right in the middle.
Joe Carroll Fabianchi, Alamo Colleges. Although it's had a very little effect, we are making more things mandatory at the beginning. And so this is not about necessarily the student, but about our way of working with the student, because we know that research says that there are some things we need to do to better prepare a student to be successful at the beginning. And
what are the examples?
We're doing more and more of that.
What examples of the new mandates you may be requiring of students?
Well, we've stopped enrollment 10 days before the first day of class in order to ensure that, well, part of it is because of the need to manage class size. But enrollment management, we want to make sure that students are prepared, and so we want them to enroll earlier and be better prepared to be successful. And we believe that will have an effect on completion and successful completion and persistence. But that's one. We are putting in some requirements that students must complete before they can register, particularly new students, like some modules that they need to complete. And we had already begun to require some pre-assessment information that they have to complete before they can test. So, I think these things, although they've not affected enrollment as much as we feared it might, but I do think those kinds of things will have some effect.
When did you put those policies in place? Was it last fall or was it before?
The enrollment, I believe the stopping enrollment 10 days early has been there more than the fall. The modules that we've added were added this spring. So we've kind of gradually made some more and more things mandatory for students to complete.
Thank you.
Yes, we had actually talked a little bit about some of the late enrollment policies and whether if that's the sort of thing that you're seeing that when you first instituted them, maybe you saw some drops in enrollment, students not showing up, but then over time, maybe by the next fall, students were used to that and you weren't hearing that as a reason for enrollments. And I think Don Perry's comments about the connection between late enrollment and flex entry that we're seeing, that's something we hadn't thought about, and I think that's a really good point, and I wonder if other folks are seeing that also. So just if you have any thoughts about how these policies are affecting enrollment and if maybe we've seen some dips or some changes where that won't be continuous, but it's just something that happened for that year.
For those of you that do have flex enrollment, are you seeing increases in that? The second question, feel free out there in cyberspace to also pipe in because we can hear you. Second question is, what is your institution doing to meet the participation targets? Do you have committees that actively look at the data to see where your numbers are? Or after your 12th class day, are you looking at those numbers to see how they're affecting? We know that tuition is a major factor in how we operate our schools, and so the enrollment certainly is impacted when you're not reaching the numbers based on your budgets and the expenditures that you have, and the staff, of course, that you're committed based on the courses you anticipated having to teach. Don't be afraid to speak up. This is a time to put some thoughts out there to...
Hi, I'm Soon Mers from Austin Community College. And, ACC has put a lot of effort into doing student recruitment with the College Connection program. And so we've done a lot for access, but now, we're looking at persistence and trying to keep our students, the ones that we bring in, and our retention rate could improve quite a bit, and so we're putting the efforts there to try to keep the students that come in and help them succeed, and in doing that, increasing our enrollments.
A question in the back of the room.
Robin Carrillo, Northwest Vista College, Alamo Colleges, San Antonio. We would echo that same sentiment that we've always had a very strong, robust participation from our recruitment side for enrollment with College Connection participation and strengthening our high school partnerships, along with our dual credit programs as well. We also have a strong focus on the completion or degree completion or graduation, especially as we're looking towards the success points and the changes in our funding. So we have done extensive outreach through our public relations department to our current student body to assist with our persistence as well.
Any other comments in terms of the participation side, actively going out and recruiting?
I had a comment come in from San Jacinto that they're seeing students taking fewer courses, and they think that's slowing completion, that the students who are coming in aren't taking as many courses as they did in the past. I see a lot of people nodding their heads. Are other folks seeing that at their institutions? Students are enrolling but not taking as many, which doesn't help us in terms of time to degree, certainly, if we're seeing that type of change. Any idea what's causing that? Yes, Don.
Don Perry, Dallas. Yes, we've done some preliminary analysis on that. The fact that employers, while the employment numbers are somewhat better, the fact of the matter is that many employers still have not seen the break point for hiring new people because of the cost associated with benefits. So what they'll do is they'll ask employees to work overtime. And so when our students are employees and they're working overtime, they have less time to come to classes and they take fewer classes.
I think another thing we might also look at is that students may not be taking fewer courses, but we're seeing a return to the course-taking behavior before the economic downturn, and that it's just, we're going back to the typical course-taking behavior. If we go back and look 3 years ago to 5 years ago, it's just a return to a normal behavior of our course-taking.
And that's something we can actually look at statewide. So that's a very good idea, I think, for us to go back and see if that's happening everywhere or just at certain institutions.
Right.
Several of you were shaking your heads. Are there additional comments beyond what the people on the front row said?
I think another thing, Marlon Moat from Cedar Valley College, Dallas County Community College, that the satisfactory academic progress with financial aid has also been something that has been a barrier, as well as the meningitis has also been something that our students have come against as far as enrollment and keeping them in school.
Let's go to question number 3. What could the coordinating board do to help you increase persistence and/or success in the short term at Texas colleges? This is your golden opportunity. What about some of you out there that are listening in? No, are they muted? No. They're not muted, are they, Mary? No, they can hear us.
Can somebody remotely just say hello, maybe?
Hello out there.
Jack Wardlow, South Plains College. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Thank you.
Just want to make sure you're owing me a living. Thank you.
What can we do to help you in terms of persistence and success on your campuses? Remember, I said we're meeting every week, so there's a team of about 20 people that are actively engaged in this discussion. Back of the room.
Before students go on in Florida to 4-year, they have to have a community college completion degree. If you have the power to do that, that would be great. That would definitely increase persistence.
Yeah. Well, that's something definitely to bring to the table to our leadership, but also right now in the real short term that we have, since we're finishing a session, and that message will certainly be delivered. This is being recorded, so the transcription from what we've learned is going to be shared with the leadership of the agency.
I had another emailed comment related to persistence. This is from Odessa College. They've successfully been able to lower their drop rates per semester, which has increased retention. They're working towards a completion by design to ensure students are well supported during their time at Odessa College. And perhaps another email with more information about what you've done to lower those drop rates would be very helpful. But thank you for your comment.
Have any of you here seen a drop in your drop rates? Have you been working on something relative to that to help students not leave courses?
Don Perry, did you have a question or a comment?
Well, I did have one comment on, and again, this is not a short term per se, but I do know that there's some legislation that the coordinating board encouraged related to Texas grant and the funds that are available for community colleges for their students. And so I think that I applaud that effort. I think we all at the community college applaud the effort to provide better ease of access to state financial support. So thank you for that, and hopefully that may, if it does go through, that may in a short term of 2 years could prove to show some successful benefits.
Yeah, you should totally do.
Billy Ressler, North Central Texas College. There has been some discussion regarding a student success course that is allowed for not just taking but degree completion and also core. So it is something that the students would take, and it's not a class that won't help me or won't go towards my 4-year degree or something of that nature, because that would help students, in way short term to persist. Should help with persistence, and then also long term to the completion.
Jane, you had a comment?
I was going to make a couple of comments about the Texas grant proposals. I believe the information you're talking about is there have been proposals to create a more active transition or transfer policy for the Texas grant program. Right now, for a person who did not receive Texas grant as a freshman or sophomore to get into it as they go to a 4-year college, requires that student to have acquired an associate's degree and then enroll and receive the Texas grant within 12 months after getting that degree. The proposal would open to transfer students, anyone who has at least 24 hours and a 2.5 GPA, to be able to transfer to a Texas university and qualify for or compete for a Texas grant. I make that a change in wording simply because that all depends on the funding in the program. The other proposal is to possibly pull the 2-year colleges out of Texas grant and move the funding as well to the TEOG program, which has more flexible requirements and we think could improve the ability of more community college students to receive that kind of aid.
And that was the one I was speaking.
Okay.
I think there were some comments, or someone wanted to speak in third row. Yes.
Ron Epps, McLennan Community College. The verdict is still out on this, but we're having all our students, we're working on emotional intelligence with our students, sending all our students as first-time college students are going through a success course similar to what's been talked about as far as study skills, etc. If they do not do well on the Accuplacer in at least 2 areas, then they'll take a second course to help build on what they learned in the first course as far as study skills. All the gateway courses, those courses that everyone's going to have to take, English 1301 and history and things like that, we are incorporating this emotional intelligence into those courses. So, like I say, the verdict is out. We just started it. We'll have to see what happens.
There's a question coming in from the outside world, and then we'll go back to the third row again for some comments.
Yeah, and actually, this is related to discussion. This comment came in earlier from Grayson College, and they were saying that they're seeing students come to them who are more unprepared academically, but also emotionally. And his comment is that the students have a smaller sense of what they want to do, why they're there, and what they want to do with their lives. He said they're not motivated. So that kind of ties in to what you're talking about in terms of addressing those issues. Are other people sensing that students are coming in with those issues, not just academic preparation, but sort of the emotional preparation? Okay, I'm seeing lots of nods.
Other comments?
Larry Root at Galveston College. I would no way and hold the Higher Education Coordinating Board responsible for turning this around, but back during the times of the tough economy, high unemployment rate, there was a lot of discussion in the legislature and everywhere else about the low return on investment. It's no longer cost effective to go to college because you could maybe spend 2 years in the work world and be making the same salary as you would if you went to 2 years of community college and then went on. I'm not saying that that's necessarily disproportionately affecting our campus, but in general, I think it's subtle but pervasive. If we can change the conversation, return it to the inherent value of education in general and higher education at the community college level in particular, you'd think that with our relative lower costs compared to other higher ed alternatives, that should be an advantage in our favor. But if there's any way we can have a PR campaign or just change the conversation from the sort of more anti-educational, well, you just might as well go in the workforce, to more the value inherent in college education, I think that would help.
We can certainly deliver that message to all our P16 councils across the state that are also working with Generation Texas.
I think we are trying to address that because we have all those reports where we show the wages after graduation, the comparison wage between a person who graduates and the person who doesn't, just lives without anything. Right now we are working on a tool that will show the wage after 10 years. So it will be 135, so it will show a progression, how those wages will go on a longer period of time. And we hope these tools will be used more and more by students. So we hope that the advantage of having a degree and different levels of degree and the difference between them will show in real life wage.
I think we have a comment, Joanne.
Two things. First, the student development course is really important. We have data to show that students who, and we make it mandatory for new students, that students who go through that are much more persistent and have much higher success rates. But we've had it as a developmental course, and we need, and I think for our students' sake, we'd like to make that probably that learning frameworks course that can be offered as education, whatever, 1,300. But I think working with you all, if we could figure out how to, what's best for students. I mean, we're finding that if we make that part of the core, it has some advantages and disadvantages. If we make it part of the 18 hours beyond the core, it has probably more disadvantages than advantages. So I think that's something that it would be helpful if we could explore together in the short term. And the other is, with the emphasis now on workforce training and with the emphasis on trying to decrease the number of courses and the number of students involved in developmental education, we are also really wrestling with how to do more targeted advising before we ever let a student enroll the first time. Because we know that if we can create career paths, advise students based on what they score on the new AccuPlacer, and then help them to get into a career field that they're interested in, and then show them the various opportunities within that career field, from some certificates that don't require any maybe basic skill levels to higher. But it's how to do that and still remain your cost effectiveness, because, and I don't know, I'm not sure what the coordinating board could do about that, but we're trying to figure out how to do that even with non-course based remediation. Before we let them enroll, they still have to pay for that. And so, do we charge a fee that is really kind of a first time in college so we can get some career advising in there? Or how do we do that is a dilemma that I'm sure we're not the only ones facing.
Any other comments? Let's go to our next question then. Did the changes in state and federal aid impact your student enrollment? Do you anticipate that this may impact enrollment for 2013-2014? Any thoughts? I see you shaking your heads really deep, so who can speak up?
It's difficult to transcribe 17 heads nodding yes into the printout.
Dr. Gardner won't understand that when we meet on Fridays.
Soon Mers, Austin Community College. I've had a conversation with our financial aid director, and one of the things that we talked about was that some of the increase that we had in the last couple of years when the economy was bad was students coming in to get financial aid. Not necessarily to really go to school, but they needed the money to pay the rent, right? And so part of our decrease in enrollment are those students, that are no longer coming. Part of it is because of the financial aid regs. They didn't meet the satisfactory academic progress, and so they can't come back. So, it has impacted our enrollments, and we do anticipate that it will continue to impact our enrollments for the near future. We are putting in some programs in place to try to help the students with their satisfactory academic progress before they get there. So, we're trying to be proactive, but we acknowledge that it will be a problem, at least in the near future.
Other comments? There were lots of head nods. Yes, sir.
Joe Crowder, Cisco College. We did a study trying to figure out where our enrollment changes were coming from. And we did a graph like the one you did with the employment rate. But then we disaggregated it into Pell students, non-Pell students, and dual credit. And what we found was that the Pell student curve was exactly the unemployment rate. So you saw some fit in the curve that you did, but if you disaggregate it by Pell Grant students, you'll probably find it's very close to the same curve. The non-Pell student enrollment was basically flat when we disaggregated it, and the dual credit students were slightly increasing. So what that says is if we're going to deal with the problem, we probably need to disaggregate the problem, deal with the problem of persistence of Pell students in one way, and deal with trying to increase enrollment of non-Pell students in a different way.
Good point. Thank you. Anybody else? Sorry.
I had another comment come in. This is from Catherine O'Brien, who's listening at San Jack. And she said that the answer to the question that we asked about financial aid is yes, and they're expecting the trends to continue. And she said that they're actually doing a new student orientation to make students more aware from the beginning of their enrollment of the consequences of some of these policy changes. So I don't know, are other people working with students to make them aware of these changes and how they could impact their progression through higher ed?
There has been at least one or two bills that were introduced to create at least a pilot project on what they call financial literacy as an opportunity to help students understand the obligations they get into when they borrow to go to college and so forth. And one would hope that those kinds of efforts would go forward, because we see a lot of students who really have no idea when they sign that form that this is a loan, not a grant. And they've been told this. It's not like they're doing this in the dark. They're being told this, but they don't conceive of the difference between the two and the implications of the two. The other thing that I've heard from a high school student or a high school counselor was, do we still need to note the Texas grant eligibility on the transcript since Texas grant doesn't exist anymore? And all of the talk in the last, especially the last session, and federal discussions as well about cuts in programs, there's probably a perception of less money being available than there may be in these programs. Texas grant is a very healthy, very vibrant program that has been growing. But there's perceptions. You're talking about the perception of losing the impact of the value in education. there may be another negative impact of the expectation that I can't get money to go to college that might be some of what's holding people back in going to school. Has anyone seen, have you had high school counselor presentations or meetings at high schools where you heard that question, is there any money available?
There's a comment, first row.
Is this on? Yeah.
Yes.
Martha Oburn,
Let's bring it
HCC.
closer to you.
Martha Oburn, HCC. I wanted to address your initial comment on financial literacy. One of the projects that we're doing right now is in partnership with a faculty member at U of H, and we've implemented a financial literacy module in our student success course, and he will be tracking those students. Well, we will be providing him some information to help him track those students over time to see what happens with them. So in a year or two, we may be able to report back to you on at least one small experiment.
How long is that module, if I may ask?
I think it takes them, the equivalent of one class period, but it's done over time, and they do the module and then they do some discussion. I haven't taken the module, so I don't really know, but I can give you the information on the person at U of H to contact if you wish.
Wonderful, thank you.
Because it's online.
Any other thoughts?
This is David Preston, Bradford College. We have a different type of problem in our area. We don't have an unemployment problem at all. So we have probably $2.5 billion to $3 billion worth of construction going on. Dow Chemical is building a $1.5 billion cracking plant, and BASF is building a $500 million ethylene plant or some sort of plant, and then LNG is building a plant, and I don't know what all's going on. But somewhere around 10 to 15,000 construction people will be in our area in the next 3 or 4 years. You can't buy a house, you can't rent a house, you can't pull in a trailer and find a parking place. So you say, well, God, you ought to have all kinds of students, right? Nope. Employers will get our students that's got one course in welding. That's what happened. And I talked to somebody from Midland, and that's a problem. Same kind of problem with the oil field type thing. So that's a different type of problem. And so we don't have an unemployment problem that you can put into your little equation. Second type of problem that I don't know whether you guys consider in your weekly meetings or not, but I don't see it in your little chart, capacity. Even if you want us to grow to 5,500 or 6,000 students or 7,000 students or whatever it is you want us to grow to, we're at 70% capacity. So you might want to put that sort of thing in your equation.
Thank you. That's helpful. We actually build capacity into some of the allocations for universities, or it is built in, for example, for the University of Texas at Austin, who made the determination that they didn't want to be larger than, I'm not sure I'm going to get this exactly right, but it's around 50,000 or something like that. But I think it is something that's worth discussing as we work towards doing those new allocations to think about capacity. And maybe it's something that we'll try to survey you folks and get some information that would be helpful there. Yes?
Yeah, Don Perry, Dallas. As a follow-up to that, capacity can mean a lot of different things. One of the most dramatic aspects of capacity is their financial capacity to be able to afford faculty. And with the cuts that we've experienced in the last 2 legislative sessions, institutional financial resource capacity has been stretched to the limit. And so while institutions in Texas have not verbalized capping enrollment, the functionality of the limitation of budgets, in essence, you have de facto enrollment capping.
Thank you. I wanted to just go back to an earlier comment talking about the not having an unemployment issue, and obviously in Texas we have less and less of one. But one thing we've talked about in our meetings is a way to reach out to some of those individuals who are flocking to those high growth areas in terms of jobs, and if there's a means to provide additional education to those students, that would be practical and doable. So I don't know if any of you have thought about that here we have a lot of people either coming into the state or coming from their home areas of the state to go to the areas where there are jobs. Some of them are living in different housing that's provided through work. Is there a way to reach out to some of those individuals who maybe just had that one course but really could use more, and reach them where they are? Is that something that is possible or practical? Yes.
This is Jeff Howard with Texas State Technical College, West Texas. We're preparing to offer oil and gas industry related courses in the fall. Hopefully we can capitalize on that. We've offered the wind energy classes in the past, and they've been very successful. Those folks are working 70, 80, 90 hours a week right now, so I don't know if we can capture any of them or not. We hope we can. We think there's an opportunity there. He mentioned Midland. You can make $15 an hour at McDonald's in Midland right now, so we've got a lot of competition out there. But we are looking at some of those to try to address those issues.
Joanne, you had
I was just going to add, we're really looking at distance online, trying to expand the availability of that. We've in the past, our online students are students really mostly that have been face to face, and this was something they could add as a convenience. But we really are looking at how we can provide the right support for online students so that they can be successful. But hopefully we can capture some of those students that either have to stop out or are at a distance for a short time. So that might be a way to keep them, keep our persistence at where we want it to be.
We do plan, as we've done in the past, to send out new lists to institutions of their students who have reached a certain number of hours. I think we've sent them to you in the past for students who are at 50 semester credit hours, so that you can. And the way we run the data is we only provide you with students who we don't find elsewhere. So if they've left you and they've enrolled somewhere else, we don't provide you that information. But you have. Wherever the last place the student landed, that's where we would inform the institution, even if they'd done the majority of their hours elsewhere. So has that been helpful to you in the past when we've provided you that information? Because we do plan that, because that's a short-term solution for students who are very close to getting their degrees, a way to let you know, hey, they're out there. As I've heard in the past, sometimes it's minor issues that have kept them from coming back that can be easily resolved if you make a contact. Yes, we have some more questions.
I'm just curious where that list was.
Oh, okay. Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry.
We have Kathy in the back, and then we'll get to
Kathy Friedrich from College of the Mainland. I appreciate you're going to all that effort to send this list, but they really are not helpful.
Okay.
I found it to be more helpful to do it on my own with students from the previous semester. By the time we get the list from you, the students' addresses do not stay current enough, and and I end up putting a lot of resources into something that doesn't have a very great return for us because they're a little bit further behind than what I can do on myself. And I mean, a student's address is almost up to date, like after they've put it in.
Thank you. Yeah, and we've actually talked about that in our meetings, and we're looking into solutions of maybe possible places where we can get updated information. And I won't go into detail there because we're still waiting on a few of those, but we're hoping that we might be able to find some sources for address updates where we'd be able to provide that to you, because we have heard that complaint, and thank you for bringing it up. Yes, another question. from the gentleman in the front.
I just wasn't aware of the list. Where's it going to?
I'm sorry?
I wasn't aware of that report. Who is it being sent to at the institution?
I will have to find out. I'm not sure. But I'll make sure when we do it again that we send, we copy the liaison, the community college liaison, and we can also copy the accountability peer group representatives. I can probably get an answer for that question by the end of the day, so I'll let you know.
And that might be a good time to kind of interject. It's not on the script, but of course the coordinating board named the community college liaisons last year, and we have some of them listening and some of them here. But we're using the liaisons to send different information to, and we're trying to not fill up our inboxes. But then I think this is kind of an unexplored area for us, and we need to figure out how to make that communication flow bidirectional. Is there a way that the liaisons could push information from the community colleges to us as we're sending it back? And obviously the goal of the liaisons was to improve communication, and best communication is bidirectional, not simplex.
Let's go on now to our next set of e-poll questions. And again, you'll be calling in or texting in to 22333. And the question that we're posing now is, does your institution have flexible tuition and fee installment plans? If your answer is no, it would be CTG 11. Your answer is yes, it would be CTG 12. Does your institution have flexible tuition and fee installment plans? Pretty high percent. Does your institution have flexible tuition and fee installment plans? No is CTG 11. Yes is CTG 12. I remember the days when you went to school and you had to pay on that first day or you didn't go. So that's really great because that helps students out. Yes.
Trish Haygood, TSTC West Texas. Are you asking there, is tuition flexible in that costs maybe differ based on their program of study? Or are you asking if we're flexible on how they can pay for their college?
The question is the latter, whether your business office allows them to pay in installments, this kind of thing.
One of those no's is a mistake. Sorry, click happy.
I'm sorry, you just failed.
A couple more. I think we have enough information. Let's go on to the next question. And that question would be, does it allow students with pending aid to enroll on an accounts receivable basis? Does it allow those students with pending aid to enroll on an accounts receivable basis? If the answer is no, it's 13, CTG 13. If your answer is yes, it's CTG 14. You want to make a comment?
We're just trying to get an idea of the number of institutions that if a student has been processed for financial aid, but the funds are not available, that they allow the student to go ahead and enroll and start taking classes pending the arrival of that financial aid. That's the question that we're posing. Thank you.
It's still student friendly. Yeah. And our next question, does it have a healthy emergency loan program, does your institution, for tuition, fees, and books? You like that word healthy, right? Does it have a healthy emergency loan program for tuition, fees, and books? What's interesting is we were trying to generate these questions and thinking about your institutions and issues that you may face. We have another page of tons of questions, but in our time frame, we tried to capture what we could. So.
The program that I'm most familiar with is funded through set-asides from the TPEG, the Texas Public Education Grant. Institutions are required to set aside 1% of their resident and non-resident tuition for TPEG, and up to 10% of that money each year can be put into your emergency loan program. What my experience in just talking to people has been that institutions set up those emergency loan funds and then quit putting additional money in each year because they felt they needed the money more for grants than for loans. But in a down economy, it may be better to put a higher share into, or at least start growing your loan portfolio more, so that you can make short-term loans, have that money come back, and then reloan to the next group of students coming down the pipeline. If nothing else, it is a negotiation with your financial aid office and your business office as to which is more important, an emergency loan program, short-term loan program, or the TPEG program, which is always a favorite among financial aid folk. Thank you.
Okay. Let's go on to our two last discussion questions that we have that we wanted to pose. And I think a minute ago we talked about very briefly on reverse transfer. So this question has to do with reverse transfer. What barriers or issues are you facing with reverse transfer, and what can be done at the state level to help improve this program? What barriers or issues are you facing with reverse transfers? Or on the other hand, is it not being a problem?
Don Perry with Dallas. One of the barriers is the fact that the universities tend to send us transcripts of all their community college students who have agreed to participate, and it's taking us a lot of time to research our files to determine exactly where those students were in their progress and whether or not the credits at the university are going to actually wind up accumulating to the extent that they would be an associate's degree completer.
I also wanted to mention I had an email from Susan Brown that when we were talking earlier about trying to get you more up-to-date lists of students, and this isn't directly related to reverse transfer, but certainly related to getting information about students who potentially could earn a degree or close to it. We have been talking about, and we're still in the early phases, the possibility of maybe trying to get address data from DPS. So we know students tend to be pretty good about keeping their driver's license addresses updated. There are some FERPA issues related with that we're working through. So it's an opportunity. It might be an opportunity for us to be able to get information that's more up to date. I also had a question about asking whether you use the speedy transcripts related to reverse transfer. And I don't know if there's any comments on that.
Billy Ressler, North Central Texas College, just in addition to what Don Perry said, and Speedy. When the Speedy transcript comes, you don't know what the reason is, and the majority of them are for new students. So as an institution, we have to then determine, is this for a reverse graduation or a new student? So we don't have that ability to know. Trying to get universities to work and give us a list so you can identify and look for these transcripts. That's sort of a manual process with each institution to continue. FERPA has always been a challenge in the process, where that question is now on the Common App, but it's, I think, taking time for it to be able to be used, and then also for institutions to be able to log it and use it on their end at the four-year university to then help us out more. But the ability to identify them as they come is one of the, we already get a lot of transcripts to keep up with, and to know these, which are very important ones, but that's one of the bigger challenges too.
Thank you. Any other comments on the speedy transcript and whether that's helpful or not, or how it could be more helpful? Yes.
Marlon Moat from Dallas County at Cedar Valley College. One of our things to piggyback on what he was saying, if there could be a code included with the transcripts, that's what our folks at our IT said would be helpful, so that it could be prioritized.
Any other comments? Our last question then, has your institution adapted, modified, or eliminated any policies, any local policies, which might have influence on enrollment? Added, modified, eliminated any new local policies that might have impacted enrollment? I guess we probably touched onto that when we spoke about the first one, when we said the fact of even stopping enrollment at a certain point. I just would like to thank you for the fact that you've allowed us to come into your meeting and to pose these questions to you. What I would also suggest is, when you go back to your institutions, if you want to, within the next couple of days, to respond to any of these, and that applies to those of you out there in cyber world, please send an email to us. You've got the email address regarding any of these questions, anything that you would like us to entertain and think about as we meet. This effort for reaching that 2015 target is very real to this agency and to the team, partially the team that's here, and to the other people that are meeting weekly with Dr. Gardner. He does report to the commissioner on a weekly basis at our executive officers meeting every 2 weeks. We do have a detailed discussion with the commissioner. A room has been set aside here at this agency where we meet, where we're posting the data, where we're actively engaged in this strategic effort. What we're going to do is go back and listen to the transcription of this meeting, take your comments. We will send them back out to you so you can see, as well as all those who listened in who maybe didn't make a comment, what was discussed today and what we've learned. We will be tracking the data every 3 months and, of course, yearly as it comes in, and are going to be watching your enrollments going into the summer, watching enrollments. And we may be sending out some questions to the field as we move forward with this, especially as we look at that fall when we get the data and know where your enrollments are, because keep in mind that we'll be entering the 13-14 academic year in the fall, and that 15 one will be right around the corner. So this is, we're not taking this lightly. We're taking it very seriously. And that's why your input today, both here face-to-face, as well as those of you who've listened in, has been invaluable to us. We have another meeting scheduled on the 26th, the day after the board meeting, with the university folks. And so they have been invited to come in or to listen in. Of course, that's a smaller group than the community colleges, but their input is also just as important to us. So that's why we divided the two groups out, because there's different issues that they face as opposed to what you are facing. I don't know if anybody of the team up here would like to make any comment in closing.
I think the discussion was very helpful. And I would say this is Julie Eklund with the coordinating board, and I think we really have a wealth of experience in this room and with us back at institutions. But I'm speaking particularly to the folks who are in institutional research in terms of your ability to analyze data related to enrollment. And I've already gotten some good ideas of some things we haven't looked at that we may want to look at. And I just encourage you to provide your ideas, to look at what we have in accountability. But if there's, and you know the type of data we collect, if you feel that there are elements to this discussion that we're not thinking about, that we haven't looked at the data for, please do let me know, because we are really we really want data to be very much a part of our efforts in terms of our activities, to be able to track what's going on and understand what's going on as effectively as possible. And without the data piece, that's really hard to do. And it's really helped us this far, but I know there are things we might not have thought about or might be misunderstanding. So again, I encourage you to provide ideas or any analyses that you've done at your institutions that might be helpful to us in thinking about the statewide data. So again, thank you for your input.
And I don't know if y'all counted or not, but I believe data was used 27 times in their closing comments there between the two of them. But I do think it's important to point out, and I know y'all know this, but sometimes it's just worthy of repeating the importance of the data and the emphasis on reporting it, not only for your institutions. I've heard there's some legislation that has something to do with y'all's budget and funding over at the Capitol that y'all are going to be very interested in. So, but that is important, but also, as discussed, we're looking at this, and so getting it timely, correctly, all that kind of stuff, getting feedback from y'all. I mean, we put together a group of questions. We welcome your emails and your comments about, well, explore this and help us do that. And we can't solve this problem, and not problem, but we can't achieve this goal. We're here to help y'all achieve this goal. And I hope that's our message, and that's what we're working on. And with that, thank you.
In closing, I would like to say that we also will be meeting with several groups this summer. We're meeting with the vice provost of the academic on the four-year institutions in a couple of weeks. And this summer, we will also be meeting with other groups around this issue so that we can get more feedback as we move forward. So this may not be the last time you hear from us. Again, as we've all said, and I want to also thank Jane and Lynn for coming to the table, and my secretary, who very quickly learned EPOL when I said, we're going to do this, and she said, we are. How are we going to do this? So she's now learned it, and we can now do it with more meetings. But again, thank you all, and I'm going to turn it back over to Julie because I think she's running the rest of the show for the rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Okay. And we're going to jump into something maybe a little more pedestrian. We're going to look at some of the changes that we've made in the accountability system. Again, thank you to all of you who joined us for the morning part of the discussion. I think most of the folks who are in the room today plan to stay throughout the accountability meeting. There were handouts that you received on the way in that I don't think we mailed a longer version, but it's the changes to the system. And I am going to move over and sit where I can be on the computer and walk you through what we have online and what some of our changes have been.
And I don't know, I was added later, and I wondered.
I'm just going to move the microphone here so you can all hear me. And I'm going to take you into the accountability system. And I do want to mention that the information, and I'll show you about the new high school grads. It just showed up in our latest news, so that's a very direct and quick link to that new information that's available. And you'll see right here, high school grads enrolled in higher ed. You can click on that and find the newest information that we just posted. And actually, this is a good time for me to put in a plug for the latest news section of the website. We've worked really hard to keep this updated when we post new information. It's a great way to look, a great place to look if you're wondering if new information has been made available, updated reports, those sorts of things. I have to say, I rarely get calls now, when's that TSI report coming out, or gee, what's happening with the graduate data? And a lot of people don't realize if you click on latest news at the top, you can scroll through all the way back to where we first switched over to our new website, and that the information about what's been posted is there. Though I have to say, last time I looked, we had some May information, so maybe we can't go back any farther than what fits on this page. I'll see if they can make it larger. But you can go back in time if you remember seeing something in the latest news. And after lunch, we'll talk a little bit more about some other new things overall that we're making available on our website. But right now, I want to talk about accountability and our accountability changes. Many of you are aware that we now have information about career institutions. This is new since the last time the accountability groups met. However, we have talked a lot about this at TARE and TACRO and in some other groups, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time. But one thing I do want to point out is that we had a bit of a challenge in terms of naming these institutions, because actually we get information about any institution that has a presence in Texas, a physical presence in Texas. So we actually have some accountability information now for public universities from other states, as well as private institutions and career institutions. What we do not have in the accountability is information about the ICUT, the independent colleges in Texas, about those institutions. And so this can be a little misleading when you see four-year institutions, not Texas Public, and Rice and Trinity and TCU, and those types of places aren't there. So I did want to point out they're not included. We just needed to find a way to designate those institutions that reflected the rich diversity of institutions available there. We also have the 2-year career institution information available. We are updating for the second year. If you go in and look, you'll see there's a lot of holes in the data at this point. I think as the institutions get used to being part of this system, the data is going to improve over time. And I'm happy to report that in terms of closing the gaps, we were able recently to look at some new numbers, and our enrollments from the career institutions were up over 20,000 students. We're kind of a year behind lag for those students, so that would actually include students from 2011. So we're hoping we'll see even more increases as we move forward. The statewide totals. This is a brand new section of the accountability system, and I tell you, I love this because often I get calls from folks who want to know the numbers for the whole state and not just broken out by the individual institution types. But we also include in this statewide the totals for the different institution types. So if you ever want to compare the community colleges or the TSTCs to universities or health-related, it's all here. It's not here for every measure. It's just some of the key measures. Obviously, the measures vary across the different institution types. But I wanted to make sure you were aware that it's available. We have the level of detail that was here before, so that's an update that we're really pleased about. Another update that we've mentioned, and I'm going to go into I think we'll go into the TSTCs first. We have a new button here that says always hide contextual measures, always show contextual measures. So if you click on always show contextual measures and you scroll down, remember in the old days, every time when you get to the bottom of the key measures, you had to remember to click this, and we would get lots of phone calls from people saying, I know that measure's in there, but I can't find it anywhere. Well, usually it's because it was hiding. And so we have actually added a button so that every time you go into your computer, if you say always show, which will show up always hide the next time, so if you do want to hide them, you can. But you can go in and scroll through and see all the measures for the different closing the gaps areas. The reason we left it so the default is to hide them is because sometimes lay people are going into the system and it can be overwhelming. There's so much data there. So we think this is a good compromise so that those of us who are very frequently in the system can get in, can scroll through. So go ahead and click that button on your main computer and you should be good to go. The other thing that I think everyone's probably noticed by now is that instead of the old days where you would hover over the element to see the definition, we've added this I for information button. It's really it should be a D for definition, but we thought that's really going to confuse people. So we went online, found lots of different I's, liked the looks of this one, and we thought, well, this is absolutely additional information. It includes the definition and the source. The only functionality this doesn't have that we used to have is you're not able to highlight this and then print it out. Before, if you hovered over fall head count, when the definition was showing, it would print. But just so you're aware, you can go into measures and definitions, and all the definitions there are fed directly by what we put into this I. So they're going to match exactly. So if you need to print out a definition and you can't do it the old way, just click on measures and definitions. They're all there, and you'll have that in print. So that's another upgrade that we're very pleased about. Now, as you know, one of the charges to the accountability groups last year was to look at the measures, go through them, and make suggestions for changes. To be honest, the universities and the health-related institutions asked for a lot more changes, and in some ways maybe they asked for changes that were a little more doable. As you can see by what we included, there were some things we weren't able to incorporate, but we incorporated what we could and what we thought made the most sense. You do have the handout that talks about the changes. I can start with the TSTCs and Lamar's. We did make a change to the self-reported information about state college activities, non-funded and non-reported. I think the complaint before is that it was difficult to get certain types of information we were trying to gather before about GEDs. We have added some totals to the data, and we've added a lot of new percentages throughout the system for both the community colleges and the TCs. And here, for example, if we look at Measure 7, you can see we've added percentages here. We've added totals across the top. I think that does make it more useful for using this data. As in the past, we've got our detail buttons with information there. If you ever are looking at university data, we added some additional elements to their detail buttons. They asked for first time in college. In the past, we've already had first time in college for the community colleges. So I wanted to show you that, and let me go to the community colleges just briefly and walk you through what was there. Okay. Whoops, I got to go back one. And I hope all of you realize when you're navigating through this system, once you've selected your institution, it's very easy to click on the other areas. And it's funny, since I worked with this system for several years, but until becoming immersed in it in my new role, there are a lot of little tricks and things that you don't realize until you actually get into it. So it's worth taking the time to explore what is here. We are working on sending PDF versions to institutional trustees and presidents, and we hope they'll go out shortly. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our community colleges, talk briefly about those changes. I know you're all getting hungry, and we'll be finished very shortly. Okay, so for our community colleges, we've got Measure 8. Our first time in college students, we've got combined data and percentages here, like we've done with the TSTCs. We've changed the community college activities. And again, this data isn't showing up because it's statewide here, but it will show up if I select an institution, I hope. And again, it's a good time to stress the importance of making sure you input the data you were asked to supply. Well, we don't have any here for Blinn, but if you do have data for the elements, for the institutional input elements, be sure to add it. We enlarged several boxes. We had a lot of comments that, hey, you're asking us for excellent programs and you're giving us, 2 lines, and that's just not enough. Also, the quality enhancement plan, we got feedback that those boxes weren't large enough. So some of the changes are just making it a little bit logistically easier for you to navigate through the system and add your information to the system. So we have I'd like to just take 5 or 10 minutes before lunch and see if there are any comments about the changes that we've made, whether you like them, whether they're things we could do better, or if you have ideas that you feel strongly about for changes that we should be making in the future, or changes that were suggested that we weren't able to incorporate into the system this time. And it's much better that you talked a lot during the prior session than right now. I'm thrilled you had a lot to say then, and I guess I'll take it as good news that you don't have much to say now, that we actually have incorporated the measures you cared about. But again, if you have any comments, any suggestions for measures, please let me know. Send them to me. I keep a tick list throughout the year as ideas come up so that I can bring it to the group the next time we meet and say, hey, here are some suggestions that came up, or if I get phone calls from folks that are trying to find something that they think is useful that isn't here, I'll bring those ideas to you next time we meet. As most of you know, we didn't have an accountability meeting in the fall. Right now, we're considering having meetings just once a year and having a primary focus of those meetings being providing information to you about what's happening at the coordinating board. That was the structure of the meeting we did last spring. Much of today's meeting is structured that way. So please, and you don't have to tell me now, if you have feedback about that, if you feel strongly that we should be meeting in the fall, let me know, or if people are comfortable with the once-a-year meetings. Certainly, we would convene a session if we felt like, in the fall, if we felt like there was something important for us to talk with the accountability peer groups about. So we wouldn't, stick to that once a year if there was something, if there was a compelling reason to do otherwise. So I did want to mention that, and then I think what we'll do is we can break for lunch now. We'll come back together at 1:45. It's actually, our legislative update is going to begin at 1 because we have a couple other folks joining us. Susan Brown's going to join us, and maybe some folks from our external research staff. They've been spending a lot more time at the Capitol than here in the building, so I think they'll have some information to share with you. But from about 1:45 to 1, I want to talk a little bit about data accuracy, data reporting. I think we've had a lot of issues coming up because of success points. We're going to talk about success points later in the day, but I think it's really important to have a conversation that's dedicated to data accuracy, because I know that your presidents and other folks at your institutions are looking very carefully at data related to success points, because we're getting the phone calls saying, my president wants to know what this is and what that is, and can you tell me why these numbers don't make sense? And so I want to talk about that a little bit, and I'm seeing seeing some nods. So I think that's probably a wise decision. Okay, well, again, thank you. I want to thank everyone so much for participating and really providing a wonderful feedback at the meeting this morning. And we look forward to all of the to having you here for all of the updates this afternoon and for more good questions and comments. So we'll see everybody back at 1:15. Now, I do, related to lunch, I have to tell you, and Sue sent me an email, and let me see if I get this right. The lunches are going to be at the back of the room, and it's going to be, or I guess she's got them maybe set up out in the foyer. And if you ordered something special, your name, I believe, will be on it. Otherwise, it's first come, first serve. And I don't have my computer. She had one. Give me one other second. There was one other announcement. I'm so sorry. Right. Okay, and Gabrielle, I think she had one other comment. Oh, yes, she wanted me to announce, I knew there was something, that if you want a receipt, they will be at the table with the lunches. So that's, I think, all the information you need to know for lunch, and we'll see everyone back at 1:15. Thank you. Okay, well, I promised everyone that we would spend a little time talking about data accuracy before we move into our legislative update. And I think it's really become very clear, primarily, or one main reason is because of the success points and the calculations that we've provided you about success points. Much of that data comes from the CBM 002. I think we've made great strides in cleaning up some of that data, so hopefully moving forward it may be more accurate, but it is becoming more and more critical that your reporting is correct on all the CBM reports. I think it's becoming more and more critical that folks in institutional research stay involved as much as they can. I know some of you are responsible for reporting, some of you are not. I know in the past we've had discussions about the fact that it's only after data is certified that you see some of the data, but it's really, I think, important that folks be involved and aware all the way through the reporting process of what is being reported, reviewing the reports, reviewing edits, and making sure this is not a situation where, well, if it's error-free, it must be right, and we're going to certify it and move on. And you never know moving into the future what data might become important that doesn't seem important now. I think the CBM 002 is a prime example of that. Now there's a lot of interest in what that data is showing. We understand there were some issues the first fall that it came out, and I've had people call and I've said, follow 9, the data is fairly messy for some institutions. Although I think for those of you who have been around a while, you will attest to the fact that we spent a lot of time having training sessions, doing webinars, trying to keep people up to date with what was in that report, with interpreting the items that were asked for. But there is still some data in there that's a bit messy. Moving forward, I think it's going to be really critical to ensure that data is clean, and also the CBM OOS. That report comes up a lot. Lots of conversations, well, we can just use the CBM OOS to look at that data. Well, if that data isn't clean, that's going to be a problem. And it's data that, for a lot of the studies where we want to use the S for, they're studies that are longitudinal. Well, in 4 years, we can track back, for the students who graduate in 4 years, we can look and see what they've done over those 4 years. Well, if the first couple of years are not clean, that means we've got to wait a couple more years before we can be confident in that data. As we get in and use it, we're finding some issues with reporting. Some of the issues have to do with developmental education students. What's being reported in one place is not matching what's being reported in another place. Maybe it would be helpful to have some discussions about what items are interrelated, but a lot of it's pretty intuitive. I think what should be where in terms of what's reported if it's on one report and not in another. I did want to mention that I think most of you probably saw the poll that we did about adding extra spaces so that we can add fractions of semester credit hours to our CBM reports for reporting non-course based options or courses college credit courses that might be 1.5 credits, that sort of thing. It's looking right now like, yes, we're going to move forward and make those changes. We had a majority rule, though people felt strongly both ways. People felt very strongly in either direction, and that was one of the challenges. And we said early on when we were coming up with some fairly convoluted ways for you to report things, because we didn't have those fractions, that we weren't going to make the changes during the last spring, during the legislative, or last fall, because of the legislative session, because of the CBMS and OE1 still being fairly new and working out those kinks. But I think moving forward, that's something that is probably going to come down the pike. It's not a final, but I wanted to let you know that that's how the poll looked, and hopefully that will make reporting some of those new types of courses and interventions, some of the changes. It'll make it easier, because we'll change all of the elements that have SCHs so they can be reported up to 2 decimal places. So I want to let people know what happened with that. If people have suggestions for what they do on their campuses in terms of ensuring that data is accurate at the point of certification, or at least at the point of certification accurate but then distributed so folks can review it. As most of you know, if we'd like to have it right when it's certified, but boy, if it's discovered within a week or 2, that is so much better than hearing about it a year and a half later, or us finding it because we were asked to do some kind of special report and suddenly we're pulling data differently and we see, uh-oh, this isn't what it's supposed to be. So if folks have any suggestions for improving that process, things you've done on your campus that have helped to improve data accuracy for CBM reports, please share. Oh, and Gabriella has something to say, so we'll. That's fine.
Anybody? I sent some time ago an email about SSN number changes.
Yes.
I don't know if everybody got it. I mean, everybody present here, but I want to mention it. Since summer 2011, Social Security awards Social Security numbers starting with 8. Before that time, we considered Social Security numbers starting with 8 as invalid. There are a lot of schools, not a lot of schools, but there are schools, we are not sure how many actually, that when they assign an ID, which is not a Social Security number, they started with 8, based on the idea that we don't confound them with a real Social Security number. You cannot do that anymore, because we either consider them valid, because at one point we have valid Social Security numbers, starting with 8, or we'll just remove them considering them invalid. So please do not assign your IDs starting with 8. Don't do that. And if you do it, please go back and change that. And if you change that, please submit an SSS change or something. So you let us know so we can go back and do persistence and graduation and all that good stuff. But please look into this. And I'm happy that there are some registrars present, because probably that's what the registrars are.
And this is actually a good opportunity for me to mention the fact that we understand that we work very closely with your data, and sometimes we make mistakes, and it helps us a lot when you review the data in the accountability system, or the data that we sent you all for the almanac, or anytime we post new data, please take a look for your institution and let us know. We actually had a situation come up where we hadn't adjusted a program appropriately for the 800 SSN numbers, and once we did that, although it was only for one institution where it made a big difference, it did make a difference for that institution, and they were very glad that they had called it to our attention that the numbers had changed. And often that happens. You'll call us, you'll say, this doesn't look right, this looks different, and we always look into it, and often it's, well, that's what you reported to us, go back and look at what you reported to us. But in this case, we went in and we said, oops, there was a particular program we didn't adjust for that SSN change. There's so many changes with data, and we all really need to work together. So I want to encourage all of you to review. We'll do our best to continue to review data. Our almanac review process was much more involved than we had in the past. I think there's going to be a press conference or an official release of the almanac sometime in the next week or two. So you'll see that in the latest news. And they're going to be mailed, I think, to presidents, but the hard copies, but we will go ahead and post it as soon as it's officially released. So thank you all for that effort. That was very, very helpful. It helped us to discover if we'd missed some things. And we are able, if there's a situation where it's obviously best for us if you maintain the snapshot of your final certified data. Sometimes institutions aren't able to do that, so let us know, and we can provide that through the secure FTP site. If you need that, if you need a copy to double check, if we're telling you, well, this is what we gave you, and you're saying, I'm not sure it is, we can actually provide that for you. Okay, so we're here to help, and we're happy to have your help. I think with many eyes, we catch lots of things, and hopefully moving forward, we'll be able to improve the quality of some of the new reports. And that does seem to come with new reports, that there can be challenges especially in terms of interpretation, folks understanding exactly what we're asking for. Doug Parker and I will be at TACRO this summer, and we're going to bring some issues from the some specific things. I didn't want to take up this meeting with that, but that'll be with the reporting officials. So we'll get into some detail there. And we also, this summer at TACRO, we are going to have a session about enrollment changes, so sort of a continuation of the meeting that we had this morning. So we will talk at that meeting about what folks might be seeing. I thought the e-poll was kind of a neat way to get immediate information, so maybe we'll try to do something like that at TACRO. But that is one of the sessions we've scheduled that Dr. Laredo was mentioning. Okay. Any other comments? And Susan is here. Yes, there she is, and in perfect timing. Susan Brown is here. Assistant Commissioner in Planning and Accountability, our fearless leader. She may have a few comments about data accuracy, but she's also her primary reason for being here is to talk about what's going on at the legislative session and to give you all an update.
Hi. Oh, wow. Hi, Martha. Hey. And we actually have somebody who's going to know a lot more about the overall legislative picture. Our GR person, I said, send me some notes, and they said, okay, you assume I have something written down. So, and here comes John. I will tell you about what I know many of y'all are concerned about, and that is called money. So, it's on. Is that better? Okay. The money. Where we are as of right now. The committee substitute, House Bill 1 committee substitute, has a total of $1.697 million for community colleges right now. Community colleges only. One of the things that's making it a little hard to analyze this time is because, is there somebody from Texas Southmost here? Okay.
The two places that
okay, well, Texas Southmost and UT Brownsville are splitting apart. So what the legislature is doing this year is funding Texas Southmost only their technical hours in the bill, and trusting the rest of their hours, their academic hours, to the coordinating board. That then we will split between UT Brownsville and Texas Southmost once we get the fall data. So it's a little hard to analyze some of this stuff right now because we don't have apples and apples. Right now, that's on the House side, it's a 2.3% decline. On the Senate side, here's the good news. The House side also does not have any success points funding in it at all. On the Senate side, the good news is that they included success points, and they have included the base $1 million funding for each of the institutions, and it comes up to actually an increase of 3.3%. And having sat in some of the work group meetings for the Senate side, what they really focused on this time, which is very different than in the past years, they looked at the rate per contact hour, and they really focused on trying to get that rate up. So that was a lot of where the focus. In prior years, have come in and they said, okay, we're going to add $100 million. They didn't even acknowledge that there was a rate. So this year, for the universities, health, and for the community, well, for all the different sectors, they have concentrated on trying to get that rate to increase, which is a good thing. Because if they're concentrating on that rate, that means that they're going to fund growth as part of that. So that is a good thing, and hopefully something that will continue as we move forward. For the TSTCs, Gary may know more about this one than I do. I saw Gary.
There are a lot of people from TSTC.
Okay. The House did not use the return value model. The Senate is using the return value model for the allocation, but among the institutions. Oh, it's in the House version too. Okay. I didn't.
They just funded it in different levels.
Oh, funded at different levels. Okay. The House actually has more money in there for y'all than the Senate. You're at $186 million for across the campuses, and on the Senate side, it's $177. All of this is going to go to conference committee as soon as they name conference committee. So we don't really know what's going to come out of that. There's talking about a whole lot of different things, so we don't know. There is one bill that you probably ought to be very familiar with, at least your reporting people and your maintenance people will probably want to know, and that is committee substitute HB 14. Got voted out of the floor, I think, even, or maybe just out of the committee.
I think it's just out of
Anyway, it has the community colleges reporting facilities to the coordinating board. I want to let y'all know that that was not a suggestion that came from us. But it's been in 3 different bills. This is the one that seems to be moving. So at one point, David, you said something about capacity, facilities capacity. We don't collect any facilities information on community colleges at all right now. This bill would change that. We would then work with y'all to see what would be a reasonable method for collecting that data. Don't know where it came from. It was a total surprise. I think part of it is we have gotten questions over the last couple of years about, well, how much capacity is at community colleges? And we have been sending them over to TAC saying, we don't know. You need to talk to the people at TAC. We don't collect that. That's all paid for out of, local tax funds, not us, not it. So I don't know whether they want us, I don't know. But it showed up. So here we are. I'm going to this is John Wyatt. He's Assistant Director in our Governmental Relations. I think that's the title.
Assistant Director for External Affairs.
Oh, External Affairs. I get the names all mixed up. They change them.
Thank you, Susan. Susan actually kind of hit the highlights. The biggest thing I do is the budget. And as she said, it's passed both the House and the Senate. And we'll head to conference committee at some point in the next couple of weeks. The way conference committee works, the Speaker will appoint members from the House and Lieutenant Governor will appoint members from the Senate. And they'll have to work out the differences between the 2 bills. The biggest differences relevant to community colleges are the funding numbers in terms of how much formula funding is provided through the different bills. And then we have a difference over how it will be allocated. The Senate version does include a tax recommendation for the $50 million in core operations and then 90% based on enrollment, 10% based on student success points. So that is fully incorporated in the Senate bill. The House bill contains that language, but it's in Article 11. And for those of you not familiar with how the budget works, Article 11 is essentially a wish list. It's things that are in the bill because they want it to be in there, but it's not actually, it won't take effect unless it's moved into the correct article, which for education is Article 3. So there's no certainty at this point that student success points will be included in the final version. That will have to be something they decide in conference. Some other bills that might be of interest to you and your institutions. There is legislation to cap the number of hours for an associate's degree at 60 hours. That legislation was heard. It's a Representative Branch's legislation, has been heard in committee and is currently pending at this point. There is a Senate version of that, SB 497 by Senator Sellier, which has passed the Senate. So that legislation seems to be well on its way to being enacted. There are a couple of financial aid bills that are relevant to community colleges. Donna Howard has a bill, HB 2820, Texas grant. One of the things that would do is limit Texas grant to universities. And so community colleges would not be in the Texas grant program. Now, there is a budget rider, a contingency rider in the House bill that would transfer the funding that would have gone to community colleges through Texas grant to the TEOG program. So that's the legislature's attempt to make sure y'all are held harmless for this change. There's a similar provision regarding beyond time in SB 27 by Senator Zaffarini, which was actually just considered in committee this past week, which would make beyond time a university-only program. There would be a provision for that funding transferred to TEOG.
And y'all may have talked about this when you were talking about reverse transfer. There's also a bill, and I do not know the number, that would, right now the universities have to send back all the students with 90 hours. There's a bill that would lower that down to 66 hours. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'm looking. I don't see. I know what you're talking about, but I don't see the bill number in here.
I don't know where it's. I don't know where it is. I think it passed one of the committees. They have the committee hearings on the same day, and so one's in the morning, one's in the afternoon, and I always get confused as to which hearing I'm even in half the time. So, but it passed through out of the committee, and I think is on the floor, and I want to say it's in the Senate side that it passed on out. But
there was also yesterday the coordinating board sunset bill was considered by the Senate, and there was an amendment offered by Senator Zaffarini to encourage statewide articulation agreements, and it was permissive. It was not prescriptive, but unfortunately, I haven't been able to actually look at the text of that, so I don't know the specifics of what it requires. Got a little surprised by that one.
It's always a surprise. Are there any bills specifically that y'all know of that you're interested in or want to hear about?
Yeah, I was looking up my alerts, and I haven't gotten down far enough. But anyway, there's both a House and the Senate version of the bills that, in essence, would limit the coordinating board's ability to consolidate or do away with degrees and certificates.
It was part of our sunset. It was an amendment added to our sunset bill that passed yesterday out of the Senate.
So the bills have been considered in committee. So those standalone bills have both been considered, but it was actually added to our sunset bill.
Oh, it was?
In the Senate.
Yes, it was an amendment to our sunset bill.
So if that, it still has to go through the House, but if that is maintained, then that authority will be removed.
Okay.
David, did you have one?
Just in what universe?
No comment. I think it would be politically incorrect for me to comment on that topic. So I'm trying to think. On the K-12 side, was it HB 4?
Oh, HB 5.
HB 5.
The high school curriculum, yeah.
high school curriculum is still, I think there were
Well, it passed the
amendments?
House, yes. So it was considered and passed the House, and then our
I haven't
indication
kept up with all of it.
our indication is that it will come up in the Senate next week.
So that would be something that would probably have a lot to do with y'all. So something you might want to watch. That would be the requirements.
And our fiscal analysis of that bill, our projection of fiscal impact was based on the additional developmental education that would be required as a result of students presumably completing under the foundation program and therefore not being college ready.
Especially with the new TSI.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we made the New York Times on that one about Texas taking a big step backwards. Yeah, that's why we want to be there, or not. Any other questions on legislative stuff? There's a lot of I don't knows. Something has passed one house and not passed the other, or, going to conference, or, a lot of that kind of thing. So, yes, yesterday's TRB hearings. I have not seen the committee substitute for TSTC, Lamar, or anybody who gets tuition revenue bonds. They had each of the presidents, or at least systems, come up, talk about whether their TRB request was what they actually needed, or if they would be able to cut back some, that sort of thing. So they went through all of that, and there's supposed to be a committee substitute coming out next week, I understand, on what that does. Who knows? I think there is money, a contingency rider.
There's $200 million
in the contingency rider that would kick in on FY15. There's no money for FY14 in the contingency rider. It's all in FY15. Flip a coin. I don't have a clue what's going to come out. Right now, what's in the bill is over $200 million. I know that much.
Oh, yeah.
It's, the total amount is 2 point something billion. But how much the debt service is for 1 year, I don't.
I think the annual debt service is like 168. So I think the debt service is actually under.
Oh, okay. So the debt service may be all right.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's very likely that this bill is headed to passage in the Senate. But I don't know what the prospects are in the House. I do think you have a larger contingency over there that's more sensitive to issues of debt.
Yeah, because there was not a contingency rider on the House side.
There was not.
The House did not have any type of contingency rider for TRBs. So we're only halfway through. Yes.
There's a lot of bills out there.
I'll be honest, I'm not entirely familiar with them.
Senate Bill 62, Jay Nelson's. It
changes the age, doesn't it?
In the Senate, it's at the engrossed level, so it's ready for full vote for the third time.
And I think what it does is lowers the age at which students have to do it. But
is that
22.
That also extends the time into the semester? They don't have to have it quite as early.
Right.
I believe so.
Right.
It extends the time, so they don't have to
extends the time
before they come in,
right.
but they have to have it within 30 or 45 days.
45 days.
45 days, yeah. Thank you.
So I don't see that having a lot of opposition on the House side. And it passed through committee pretty easily.
Yeah,
there was some discussion, but it was not.
There's discussion, but I wouldn't say there was opposition.
Yeah, there wasn't really opposition. So I that may have a pretty good shot at going through. Any other questions? Boy, y'all are easy. Of course, we don't know a lot. Everything is either this house or that house, and you're kind of halfway through the process, so who knows really what's going to happen.
And we'll do our usual update at TACRO in the summer, when the session's over and let those
when
of you
session's over and veto period's over, everybody will know a lot more. So
okay, well, thank you very much, John. Actually, success points are next on the agenda. Though, Susan, while you're here, are you going to stay with us?
I'll stay for a little bit.
For a little bit. I didn't know if we talked a little before you got here about the importance of data accuracy, and I didn't know if you wanted to.
Okay, we have been running success points over and over and over and over and over and over again, and we have worked with TAC, with Don Hudson, laying out and spelling out exactly what years we used, what data elements we used, all that good stuff. And then we get responses back from him saying, well, that data's not right. I'm like, okay, that is what was certified. I can't go out and do it, So everybody is looking at this data probably more so than they have in the past. So we really need it to be timely and accurate. We're running into that problem a lot. We ran into it with Hazelwood. However, this was the first year of reporting, and there were some understanding issues about legacy and non-legacy, dependence versus legacy versus all that kind of stuff. So there were issues there. We had to go back out and resurvey, and it doesn't make anybody look good. Doesn't make the institutions look good, doesn't make us look good. So we really need to make sure we get data correct. We try not to go back and decertify old data and to recertify, just from the sheer fact that by the time it goes out and it's over a year old, it has already gone to TEA for the TPIR reports. It has already been published. It has already been so it's already been used a lot of times. And so then if you go back and recertify, you would not believe the number of questions we get is, how come this number doesn't match that? And we get enough of that already because they'll pick up a report from a national report and use the IPEDS number and compare it to our number. And they won't compare just publics. They will compare everybody to our number. And so it would be a big help. So we do enough explaining as it is what I'm trying to get at. And so we're really working on trying to get it accurate. In the near future, we have been asked to report out our data in a more timely manner. So I'm going to give you some new terminology. So in case you hear these words, you might go, oh, somewhere that makes sense. Yeah, I heard that before. We will have preliminary. We will be reporting out preliminary data. We are moving up the date for those preliminary. We'll be asking for them. I'm trying to push them off to October 1. I'm not sure I will be able to push them off that far, but I'm trying. Then we will report out another number that is once everybody has reported. So right around November 1st, we will put out a new number. And then when everybody is certified, we will put out another number as the certified. And we will be saying the certified number of head counts or whatever. And then we will probably put out another number that will be called the final. And that number will include the flex entry students that are reported the next spring, so that we have a fuller count of how many students y'all had there in the fall. So, and we will probably have to start asking for a preliminary spring head count. We will want that'll be the final. Unless somebody can come up with better names, I was trying to somehow differentiate so that when we get information back saying, why does this number not match this one, we will have a clue as to why. This is coming from a request, a legislative request, saying, how come we have to wait so long to find out what the fall numbers are? And we're getting pushed that everybody understands that. The job numbers come out, and then there's another requests down along the way, and that's the real number. So y'all can put out the same sort of thing. We're like, I don't want to. I think we're going to. So that's, there will probably be a spring preliminary number. I'm trying to make that just one number. I want a preliminary spring total head count. One number. We will ask for it probably first part of February, that we will start asking for that number. It will be one number. Don't want to collect any more than that. We collect enough information. That will be the preliminary that you will hear about in the spring, starting in this same cycle. So that is my attempt to report out more often and not collect a lot more data. So we will be updating this number. We really don't want to add reporting burdens to y'all. Y'all report enough, we collect enough, but we are getting really pressured to release data much earlier. I'm trying to differentiate. So we will have a preliminary, a non-certified, a certified, and then a final. And that's how we plan on differentiating it internally.
May I ask one other data-related question, because you weren't here? Is it absolutely final now that we are going to be adding those spaces to all the CBM reports for the semester credit hours, or is that I said it may be coming. They all participated in the survey, but I didn't want to say it's absolutely final, so I didn't know if you knew more than I did at this point on that.
We think so. I'm sorry.
Okay. Some folks really wanted it.
The good news is that we're trying to get some contracts in place to help pay for some of that. Again, we have some money from SLDS grant that we're going to be distributing out to help pay for that. I know it doesn't cover the entire cost, but...
Thanks for adding that. I didn't mention that. So I think that's an important piece that hopefully there might be some funding to help. And it really, for those of you, and I know there are folks out there, for those of you who have reporting officials who really want the numbers to match, I know it's been very frustrating for them that we've added all of these, partial credit courses, and it's been really hard because things don't match up. And I think it'll make it a lot easier for the reporting officials to be able to double check their numbers, reconcile their numbers. So there are definitely advantages to having it, though we know it's going to be a lot of work.
And for those of you who know me, I don't ever stay on topic, so FYI, I don't know how many of y'all are looking at competency-based courses and programs and that kind of stuff. We will probably be pulling together a group of people to talk about how to report competencies in a way in which we could fund them. So we're talking about a couple of options internally. At some point, we will be sending that out to get input from the institutions on if this is a way, or do you have a better way, or, so you can kind of just start thinking about how you would possibly report those. Right now, we've got a pilot going on with South Texas College. Anyway, South Texas College and A&M Commerce, where they are doing competencies. At this point, the plan is for them to accumulate those competencies up to a course and then report it as a course. The feds have just put out an announcement that they will allow competency-based for financial aid purposes. So we need to be able to collect that information, use it for our financial, so if we want to be able to use it for state financial aid purposes and to be able to fund any of that, we're trying to figure out a good way to do that. And so if y'all want to put your thinking caps on, you will be getting something about this as we kind of go through the process. Or if you have ideas that you would like us to consider, go ahead and send it in, and we can start kind of working that into our thought process at the same time. Y'all come up here. Come on up, James and Melinda. So anyway, that's just one of my other little projects we're working on that we will be trying to get y'all's input on at the same time. So,
okay, any more questions for Susan? Or I think what we're going to do...
I'll work on my presentation due Monday.
Yeah, I think we'll skip the success points for now, and we'll get back to that because James Goman has joined us from our Workforce Academic Affairs and Research Division, along with Melinda Valdez, and so we're going to let them do their presentation, which is coming up on the agenda a few items down, and then we'll backtrack and do the success points and talk briefly about critical fields. And I think your PowerPoint should be loaded if Jana can find that one. Sue Sutton said it is there. It's not in my handout file. It's in. Yes, there it is. Great.
Great. Hello, everyone. How are you doing today? Nice to be here with you. See a lot of friendly faces out there. Everyone hear me okay? Do I need to pull the mic a little closer? Okay, great. So, yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on in our Academic Affairs and Research Division, mostly on the Academic Affairs side with a little bit on the other side as well. Let's see. We've got a graduate program review system which is coming up. That's going to affect a lot of your transfer partners. I just wanted to mention, given how much review you guys go through with your workforce programs and we're now initiating a institution-driven process for the universities and health-related institutions where all of their master's and doctoral programs are going to be reviewed once every 7 years. And I just wanted to throw that out there so you guys are aware of it. Can we go ahead and advance on through? And one more? Yeah, and one more. Great. A lot of it is qualitative. It's a little bit of a contrast to the existing undergraduate program review system that I'm going to talk about in just a little bit. It mostly revolves around using external reviewers in contrast to the existing program review system focused towards undergraduate programs, which is primarily a data-focused system. And advance again, great. So undergraduate existing program performance review, which we often abbreviate as EPPR. Well, the basic purpose is to help set both standard setting and review, and obviously legislation may influence a lot of this, but the idea was basically to go through the many data points that you guys submit to us on a regular basis and try to construct that on a programmatic level into something that would be meaningful for you, something that would allow you to look at your programs in a very detailed way and to get sort of your own benchmarks for how you're doing. In other words, you can look at yourself in relation to your accountability system peers. You can look at yourself in relation to the other institutions just geographically near you. You can compare your programs to the whole state. And as we build up more and more years of review, you'll be able to compare your own performance to yourself over a span of time. I think that's, and we hope this is going to be a useful tool for you for general program improvement. Could we advance again? Strategic planning, yes. Can we go back one? Backwards? There we go. What are the EPR measures? Well, as I said, they're information that you're already submitting. It all comes through the CBM reports. Quantitative measures and definitions based on UEAC recommendations, but as much as possible, we've tried to align them with existing measures in the accountability system. But obviously, we have to do some things a little bit differently when we're examining things on a programmatic level versus simply an institutional level. But a lot of the same types of categories you're going to find: enrollment, persistence, transfer, completion, placement. Yeah. A lot of the basic measures of efficacy and efficiency in higher ed. Next, please. Okay. So there's a sample of how you can break things out Again, much like the accountability system, you can look things at a broad level, or you can drill down further into specific measures. So, for instance, you can look at, when you look at graduation rate, you can look at or compare the students that are transferred into your institution versus the students that start at your institution. You can look at number of semesters. You can look at credit hours attempted. You can break it down in a number of ways. Next, please. Website example, the graphic display is a challenge, partially because there's so much information in it. So one of the things I would urge you to do when you get in there is to play with it a bit and see what the possibilities are. In particular, this can create some really large displays, absurdly large, really. I mean, if you don't filter much and you put in, all 50 community college districts, and you run it across a broad spectrum of zip codes, you will get an enormous amount of data thrown at you. So you'll definitely want to narrow it down so it'll be a little more meaningful. Next, please. Okay. The next thing I want to talk about was core curriculum. Coming up, the new core curriculum based on the rules revisions. This was a long process. The UEAC, the Undergraduate Education Advisory Committee, put a great deal of work into this, and it's certainly a big deal, because the last time that we went through this process was back just after 1999, when the legislature had made some changes to the law, and we reformulated the core at that time. And really, we've been running under that model for 13 years. Next, please. Purpose, core objectives. The way that this is put together, last time we had the basic intellectual competencies, and we had some other dimensions of how the core ought to be filled out. What is the core actually trying to get at? What are students trying to achieve? A lot of those things are still here. One thing that we didn't have before in quite such a concise form was that statement of purpose that we have up there. That students will gain this foundation of knowledge of human cultures and physical and natural world, develop principles, intellectual and practical skills. All of those things put together, you can see, add into the component areas and the core objectives. So we have 6 basic core objectives. You'll notice one of the things that won't show up in either the component areas or the core objectives will be computer skills. Okay? This is one of the more significant departures from last time. As I understand it, the general thinking was that now, 13, 14 years later, with all the revolutions that we've gone through in technology and all the social changes that have brought, that now computer skills are fundamental. In fact, so fundamental that they almost might be considered something that students are now picking up at grade school level or middle school level, or certainly by high school, that they've picked up a lot of these skills. It's not to say that they're not important. Obviously, they're so important that they're almost assumed at this point. Next, please. There are their component areas. You'll notice that we still have the same number as before. So one of the structural things that's largely been preserved is the number of component areas and the way they break down. If you look at this closely, although some of the names have changed, you could pretty well superimpose the previous component area names over this, and it really wouldn't change too much. In other words, conceptually, the categories are still largely the same. Communication, math, life and physical sciences, language, philosophy, and culture. That one's broadened a little bit, but it's still not that different than before. Creative arts, American history, government, political science, those are now broken out separately. They had their own transcript codes before, but they were still subsumed into that conceptual area of the social and behavioral sciences. Now they're all broken out separately, and now what we used to call the institutionally designated option is now the component area option. Next, please. Okay. Now, if we map out those 6 core objectives over the new component areas, this is how it breaks out. Okay. You'll notice that every one of them has at least 3 core objectives, and most of them have 4. And down there on the bottom, the component area objection, the component area objective, the component area option still has to have at least 3. That's part of how you figure out what to put in there, which we'll get to now. Let's next, please. Okay. Component area option is one of the trickier areas, so this is something that just deserves a little discussion on its own. As it says there, all courses must be aligned with a description of at least one of those other 8 foundational component areas. Okay, there's a 6 credit hour allotment for this spot. At least 3 of those credits must match the FCA and description and core objectives of one of the other areas, and at least 3 credit hours must match the description and core objectives for basically any area across the board. What do you put in there? Well, basically, you can make it something where students have sort of a menu option, which is how some of you handle the institutionally designated option now, right? Students pick A, B, or C from this category. They pick A, B, or C from that category. Or you could be something that you want all your students to have, and you've got this structured in such a way that you can be sure that they're going to take 1 or 2 of these selected courses because there's a limited menu of options. Next, please. Implementation, that's going to be coming up soon. So what are the basics there? We've got a timeline. What will the CB want by November 2013? So we're coming up pretty close here. Basically describe to us how you selected the courses that are going in. Obviously, we want to have a sense of how your faculty were involved, what sort of administrative oversight was provided, who was on the committees, and so forth. An objective assessment plan. This is something a little more involved than we would have asked for initially back in 1999, right? How are you going to determine that your students are attaining the appropriate levels of each core objective, okay? The idea is not one of individual course evaluation so much as of the core objectives as delivered across the entire curriculum. So what we're expecting is a curricular evaluation. Now, to get at that, obviously you'll have to do some course evaluation as well. But course evaluation in and of itself is not the point. Plan for assessment, including methods, targets, analysis, actions, and follow-ups. Especially here at the beginning, that part can be rather broad, meaning that you may have some sense of which courses you're going to use to evaluate which particular objectives, but you may not be entirely sure of, say, what your benchmarks are going to be. We want to have a sense that you know what your plan is, but if you don't have all the details, say, of the particular benchmarks, that's okay. That's something that you can figure out as we go along. Okay? Obviously, we've got to have the list of proposed courses. That goes right back to statute, right? That part of the statute has not changed. The law says that we set up the framework, our agency sets up the framework, but you folks at the institution select the courses. So basically what we're going to do is just make sure that your course selections fit the framework that we've set up. Okay? And this is not so applicable for you guys because all of you guys use the Texas Common Course numbering system, but when I give this presentation to the folks at the universities, I do remind them that wherever applicable, you have to include the Common Course number in there. Okay? And then next, implementation. This is something obviously that's going to be going on now if it's not already started, and I certainly hope that it has already started, right? You're putting together your faculty groups, you're deciding your institutional process, and you're having the discussions and debates, which I'm sure are completely non-acrimonious and collegial, about which, I'm sorry, I can't say that and keep a straight face, and decide which courses go in here. These are very important decisions, and they affect a lot of the different aspects of your institution. They're going to affect your students' experience. They're going to affect how your different departments are staffed and composed. There's no denying that this is a crucial decision that deserves a lot of deliberation. August 2013, starting this August, institutions' core curriculum are due to us. We've already got a few of you lined up to be sort of our beta testers and submit something to us in midsummer. And thank you to those institutions that volunteered to do that. That's helpful for us, and I hope meaningful for you. Okay. If I remember correctly, we're trying to arrange a schedule where, say, August, we don't get, all 50, 54, however many of the institutions represented here, all dumping them on us at once. We hope we're going to try to make it so it's spaced out a little bit more than that. But however they come, our commitment to you is that by February of next year, we're going to get you the feedback that you need. Because we know that you have publication deadlines, you've got things to arrange on your own end, and you can't wait forever for us to make a decision. Okay? Then the next fall, not this fall, but fall 2014, it's effective. Okay? Statewide implementation. Notice that it's applicable for incoming freshmen. So you could say there's sort of a built-in teach-out expectation here that students going in under the old system should be allowed to complete under the old system. Next. Okay. Contacts, existing program review, Dwayne, many of you already know Dwayne, so I don't think I need to show you his face. Luckily, because he's out in the field right now. If I remember correctly, he's been both doing a Perkins site visit this week, and he's also been involved in WECM leadership. But Dwayne Hiller is now taking over. I'm very sad to say that we have already lost Lucy Heston. She's going to be moving out of state pretty soon. She's not formally resigned from the coordinating board yet, but she's already done with most of her working days. She's going to be back to help us with this last board meeting this April, and then we're all going to have to say goodbye to her. And we're all very sad to see her go, because she's largely been the architect of this, at least from our internal point of view. Okay. So Dwayne can help you with questions about the existing program review system that I just described. I'd also like to introduce you to one of our newest staff members, Melinda Valdez-Ellis, that Julie introduced earlier. And Lucy's done a great job of trying to give Melinda a crash course in the core curriculum, and she's going to be helping me try to administrate core curriculum policy during the coming months and years. So I've put her contact information here, but be aware that I'll also do my best to help you with any general academic affairs questions, whether they're about low-producing programs, the core curriculum, about new program requests, whatever it is. In Lucy's absence, I'm essentially going to be it for academic affairs leadership, at least for a little while, until we can get a replacement in. Okay.
Okay, do we have questions for James? Yes.
Few slides back.
Okay. Oh, okay. Link to specific evidence of where the students will demonstrate the core objectives, such as syllabi or other material. Okay. Basically, that's where you show that. Let's see, specific evidence where the course demonstrate the core objectives. Oh, okay. That we want to see tied together how you're picturing that the courses link together with the objectives. Yeah, yes, like a matrix or a curriculum map. And that's something that you could provide, since now you're all required to have your syllabi posted online. You wouldn't have to certainly send us printed materials in, say, PDF form. You could just link to an appropriate syllabus or several syllabi and give us a page reference or something like that if you wanted to. Does that make sense? In other words, how you do this is up to you, but we want to see the link established and documentation provided.
James?
Yes.
Don Perry, Dallas. Institutions need to be careful about that, because the course syllabi may be responding to student learning outcomes at the course level, not necessarily the core component area level.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Don. I hadn't thought of that. But yes, because typical course syllabi are going to be geared towards more or less the immediate needs of students and the instructor, they may not be geared towards this usage, in which case you may need to add to what's in the syllabus or reconstitute what's in the syllabus so that it's more clear than it otherwise. Yeah, okay. Oh, no. I'm sorry. I don't want to give you the impression that this needs to be put into the syllabus if it's not already there. Simply, I was trying to cite that a syllabus could be a source of documentation. Mm-hmm.
In November. Because it says specific.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds huge.
Yeah.
I know you don't want rooms of information.
Yeah, you're right, because we could be sort of inundated with too much detail that would be difficult for us to process, rather than some sort of general statement about how you expect to assess, well, not just how you expect to assess, but where and how students will demonstrate their mastery, let's say, of the core objectives.
So how is that?
Mm-hmm. Right, process for determining the level and then the plan for assessment. That's a good question. Melinda, do you have any insight into that? I hate to put you on the spot. Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask Melinda to note this down, and let me get back to you on that. This is one of those areas where, again, much like Melinda, Lucy's given me a crash course in this topic over the past couple of weeks, and Okay. Well, that sounds like that's an important area for clarification then. So let me see if I can get an answer for you. If not today, then something perhaps I can convey to the group of you if I'm not able to get it today and bring it back to you this afternoon.
And what I was going to suggest is we can send this PowerPoint. We didn't include this with the handouts that went out yesterday morning because we didn't quite have it yet, not through any fault of the War Division. But would it be possible for you to add an additional slide once you get some clarification, and then we can send it out with one additional slide added right after this one that provides a little more detail? We've done that with some other things. I think it's a good way to add information. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I think it would be very important that this go out to the academic officers as well.
Okay, sure. We could give it a wider distribution.
What I'm thinking is we'll send it to the CTC liaisons, as well as to all of you on the list, and indicate to them that they should take a look and make a determination if it needs to go out to additional folks. That sound good? And you could certainly send it to academic officers, but I'm not sure I would from here. Okay.
In the back there?
Just as a point of how I've tried to get our faculty to visualize how to do the assessment is to be able to pick out something that they already do in their course that isolates that particular core objective. But our biggest problem is not going to be how they measure it, but how they report it. So the reporting model is what we're concentrating on framing out at this point.
In other words, how to get all those
helps.
different reports from all those different instructors for all those different courses and have it go sort of up the administrative chain and
how to make sense of it, because as you know, with academic freedom, they don't all use the same instructional techniques for each and everything. So we need to find some logical clusters of, okay, 12 faculty member do this through an essay, 16 faculty member do this through some kind of activity, and being able to gather those in a sensible way to report on various views of how that skill is demonstrated.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah, that's certainly a complex task.
Yeah, so
to undertake.
If you try and envision the reporting problem, it'll help you solve the methodology problem, the measurement problem.
Right.
Okay.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Is the expectation for assessing all the core objectives going to be a certain timeline or time frame where an institution may decide to assess objective one year, objective 2 another year? If they spread it out over time, how much time are you going to give institutions to do that? Or
well, as I recall, I don't think we've changed the 10-year assessment period.
it's still
so
the
so
10-year.
yeah, I believe that's still a 10-year period, still aligned with your SACS review cycle. You have something to add?
James, I think that's the most important thing. It's not an absolute 10 years from 2014.
Yes.
It's going to be when the next SACS reaffirmation visit occurs, and you have to back it up 2 years before that to submit to y'all.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So this, yeah, it's not an absolute 10-year cycle. It's a variable 10-year cycle, which is really, so you could sort of say idiosyncratic, unique to each institution, whatever your institution's particular cycle is. Yeah. Thank you, Don. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to listen, and it's great to see you all. It's always a pleasure to work with folks from the community and technical colleges. As you all know, that's the division I started out in, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, James. And we will get that PowerPoint out to all of you with the additional information as soon as it's ready. Okay, well, I think we're just going to spend a little time on each of the additional agenda items. A lot of these are things you've seen before. I want to start with the success points. I am not going to spend a lot of time because we have spent a lot of time with success points over the last year. We know there could still be changes, or, based on the legislative update you just heard, we may or may not be moving to success points after the session. So at least for this time around, we'll have to wait and see on that. So we can just talk about the current model that we have that I think most of you are familiar with. You have a 2-page handout, and the important thing I wanted to point out to you was not this basic information here on this slide, which is something External Relations put together for us, but what's on the flip side of that handout, which is the next slide, which is something we put together in the planning section, which is how we calculate the success points. And even with this model, we had some questions at TARE that we had to go back and get some clarification because we do capture first college level courses a little differently than we capture students meeting TSI. But what we do have available, if you haven't received one yet, and it was sent to all of the chief finance officers when they were sent the new calculations with 2012, we do have additional material going into detail about this flow chart that talks about all the CBM elements that are used for calculating success points, what points they're used for, just a little more detail than this, but I think the flow chart is helpful to get an overall sort of one-page picture of what we're doing to calculate those success points. We had a question earlier. We have only posted in accountability the success point calculations up through 2011. So we have 9 through 11 there, but your finance officers were mailed in March new calculations based on the new data that we received for fall. So we have 2012 calculations available out there, but they're not in accountability. And I think we're going to wait with accountability. We'll see what happens with the session, and then we'll update that if there aren't any changes. But it's very possible that there will be additional changes that will come. So I know a lot of your administrators have seen this data. I know TAC was working on, Cynthia Farrell had provided me with some charts and graphs that she was trying to create out of the success point data that I think is very helpful. If you've seen any of that, we have provided our SAS program to folks who have asked. If you have people on your staff who understand SAS and you actually want to see how we're programming to come up with the success points, all of those things I think can be helpful methods for understanding how this all works. So when your leadership asks you, where did these numbers come from, you can have some information. So we're trying to make that available. If there's anything else we can provide, let us know, or any questions that you're unsure about in terms of how the success points are calculated. But I wanted to make sure you knew this was out there. Yes? Sure.
One quick question. On the transfer measures, if someone comes as a dual credit student to my institution and then leaves after high school graduation and doesn't re-enroll, my assumption from lip reading is they will never be a first time in college the community college and the university, they would not be a transfer. We would not receive any transfer points for that person.
Okay, and I'm trying to find my copy here because I can't read there. We have included dual credit students in some of the calculations. And can I just borrow this? But I'm not specifically for that one. I want to make sure I get it right. So what we do for the transfer, because we do use our first time in college flag for some of this, and I believe they are included. It's at the 15 hours at the same institution, and then they transfer. So I believe they are, but I'm going to ask Jana, can you get in touch with Diane and ask her that question, if dual credit hours that a dual credit student earns are included in the transfer success point? I want to be completely sure with that. Because a lot of, aside from tracking for the, yes. You mean if they show up as transfers into your own institution, or whether if you have someone taking dual credit and then they go to another institution?
They come to us as a dual credit student.
Yes.
They graduate, they go on to the university, and the university report them as a first time in college student versus putting our FICE code in there as a transfer student, which is what I thought would maybe be the hook for y'all to identify on. So I'm trying to...
Oh, okay. So if the university student calls them first time in college, would we track back for them as dual credit? That's
they may have had 30, 40 AA degree with us and then transfer on.
Okay, we'll get the answer to that because I don't think it's clear here, and we'll double check the program. I don't want to get it wrong, so
thank you.
You're welcome.
And my question is on the transfer points also.
Okay.
You're only using what you're finding in Texas in your database, right?
Okay, and this is another interesting question because I think there have been discussions about allowing institutions to pull data in from Student Clearinghouse, and I don't know exactly where they stand, so I can get you some clarification on that.
Okay,
but I know that has come up.
Yeah, we use the Student Clearinghouse, so we're able to get the out-of-staters.
Yeah, we don't have a means because we don't get the clearinghouse data right now to add it in to our program, so you're not going to see something in the program where we pull in that data. But I know there have been discussions about that, so that could be something that may happen. And I know folks who have institutions that are on the border, often have students transfer to out-of-state institutions. Yes, John.
On the points for completion of a degree or certificate, I know you're saying unduplicated awards, but if one student receives during the same reporting period, like a level 2 certificate and an AAS, do we get to count both awards for that same student? You
don't if it's in the same reporting period.
Right.
You will get extra points if whichever one happens to be a technology degree. If one is a critical field and one is not, then you will get extra points for the critical.
Right.
You will get those points, whichever the two, even if it was the lower level degree, if it was a certificate and an associate earned in the same period.
If they graduate with more than one award during the same reporting period, we don't get to count but for one.
That's correct. That's why it says unduplicated graduates. Yes, question in the back? Right. Okay, so we're going to actually talk about this a little bit later when we talk about first college level course guidelines, but we use in our programming what you report to us as the first college level course. So if a student is reported as for the same course as meeting the first college level course requirement in reading and writing, then you will get 1 point. If that student is reported, say, in an English 1301 as the first college level course for writing and reported in history entry-level course for reading, then you'll get a half a point for each of those. So it's similar in some ways to the TSI standard that you'll get a half a point when they meet the reading and a half a point when they meet the writing and a full point for the math. Yes, on the CBM, right now on the CBM OOS and on the 2, there are items that ask about whether something is a first college level course, and those items should align. So we should, and they have to complete the first college course at your institution. So if you had someone come in who had done dual credit somewhere else, and you had told us, yes, they completed the first college level course elsewhere, you're not going to get credit for that student, or if they'd done AP or something like that and you made that determination. But we think there's some tightening up that needs to happen, or at least some guidelines in terms of first college level courses, because we've been doing some research, some analysis of data on the CBM OOS, and there's some real variability in the types of courses institutions are choosing to report. And I think now that it's part of Success Points, there's a need for consistency. So that's actually on our agenda to talk about in a few minutes when Janet gets back down. She went upstairs to ask Diane Ergel, who's the programmer who wrote the Success Points, to ask specifically about that transfer question. So, in fact, maybe we can even get Diane down here. I'll give that a try. You want to email her and see if she can? We're going to email her and see if she can come down and answer that question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see if Diane Ergel will come down, and then maybe we'll move on. And are there any other questions that aren't specific to the programming? So hopefully Diane can join us. And we are trying, again, we're trying to get the information out and available to you. A key thing to remember is we do have to match to when a student is first enrolled. That first time in college, we use that for determining when the student met TSI, but the other measures have to do with looking at 3 previous years and adding up hours, to see if someone's at 30 hours or 15 hours, looking at if they successfully completed the first college level course during that period, looking at degrees earned during that period, etc. So most of it is not based for your students on that first time in college flag. It's based on aggregating the data for 3 years for the student at your institution. But we do, for meeting TSI, we do need to make the determination of readiness when they come in. So we do have to look at when are they first time in college, and then within 2 years, did they meet the standard. Okay. Looks like we have a question from the field. Oh. Okay, yeah, it looks like we've had some questions come in on email, but some of them I think it's related to the discussion we had this morning. So I think we're okay. So if you're emailing issues in from the field that don't directly relate to the current discussion, we'll get back to you if there's a question. Okay, and I think I had one more slide that let me jump over here. Oh, is this Diane? Yeah. Okay. Diane, were you listening upstairs? Oh, I'm so glad. Here's Diane, who generally doesn't come down here for meetings, so thank you so much for joining us. And I'm sure many of you have had assistance from Diane over the years in terms of questions about data and programming. She's one of our maestros when it comes to programming. Yep, it's live with the light on. So hello. Okay. The transfer question, I think, was the key question. Would you like us to have it repeated?
Yeah, I heard you. Okay, so dual credit is included in your accumulation of hours. But the scenario that you were talking about, whether you're flagged first time in college, doesn't have anything to do with transfer, because you have to be enrolled. The transfer has to have occurred in 12. So let's say we're measuring year 12. So the transfer has to have occurred at the university in 12. So we use the FY12 cohort, and we go back and we start, let's see, 3 years ago, and we start accumulating hours. And if you hit the 15, and then the transfer occurs at a university in 12, you get the point. So dual credit hours would be included because we go back to the beginning and start clocking your time and start accumulating hours. And so as long as you get to the 15 first and you enroll in 12, at the transfer happens 12, you would get the point.
So y'all are going to cross-reference SSNs, student ID numbers,
absolutely,
versus working for the university to have them reported as a transfer.
That's absolutely right.
Okay.
We base it on the data that we have in the CBMs. We don't get any if they report the student as a transfer in that FTTR area or as a first time in college. That doesn't matter. We aren't using that flag at all for this determination. It's just do they show up at a university?
Does that Social Security number show up?
Right. Okay. And if they show up and they've done 15 hours with you, for the dual credit, or for if it could be 12 hours dual credit, 3 hours is, a student who took a summer course, whatever kind of mixture, if it was within those 3 years. Okay. Good. I actually could have answered that, but I wanted to be sure because that was a little different twist on what we usually hear. So thank you. And I think do we have another question? You've got the person who programs the success points here right in front of you. So if there are any other details that you want to know, I just make sure I got this right. In terms of unduplicated awards, if someone gets 2 awards in 1 year, we only count the 1 in the 1 fiscal year. And whichever award, if there was one that was for critical fields, we'll add the extra points, even if it was the lower level award. Right. But they'll just get the points for one award.
Out of curiosity, then, if one student earned, let's say, a level 2 certificate summer and then earns the associate degree in fall, then those are 2 separate reporting periods, and you could count awards.
That's correct.
That way.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
We rely on institutions to award their degrees at appropriate times based on the student progress through the program. Enough said. One nice thing about data is we can always take a look back and see what's being reported. In fact, we aren't on to TSI yet, but most of you know there are changes coming with TSI, and we've had institutions say, well, we may still look at students in terms of if they've met the TSI exemption or the TSI standard coming in. What if we still evaluate them and decide they need some kind of DE? Well, the point is that's not allowable in statute, and it's going to be very easy for us to look in the CBM OOS report and see if students who met the standard and cross it against the 002 and see if students who met the standard are being enrolled in large numbers in developmental ed. So, we're able to look and see if we see anomalies in the data that aren't appropriate in terms of our statutes, et cetera. So, but that is absolutely true, and you do want to make sure you understand how this is done, so there's no surprises in terms of why you got points or why you didn't get points, and so those kinds of questions are important, and I don't discourage the question. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
One question.
Joe Carroll. We've got 2. Let's start with Joe Carroll from Alamo.
Thank you. Joe Carroll Fabianchi from Alamo Colleges. As I mentioned earlier, we're really working to, especially with the new test scores, to advise students that may test into developmental but may make the decision to go into something that would not require them to complete developmental ed.
Okay.
So I'm assuming there'll be a mechanism so that we're not, I guess we wouldn't be penalized. How would that work?
You mean in terms of reporting?
Yes.
Because right now with reporting, and this is for the CBM 002,
right.
There are waivers built into the report. So if a student is in a level 1 certificate where you don't have to meet TSI, non-degree seeking is one where the institution can make a determination if they need to meet TSI, et cetera. If there's some kind of a waiver in terms of the program they're in, then that's reported as a waiver, and then that information for that student, it's not, first of all, it's not necessarily to report it. It can be reported as not applicable if the student has not met TSI, and then it's up to the institution when the student's status changes. So if the student decides, now I want to be in an associate degree program, then it's up to the institution to test that student and then report for the appropriate semester on the 002. Okay, now we tested him or her, here are the results. If a student already had a test on file, and, the decision was made to use that test, maybe it's the very next semester and everyone was comfortable with, this is where the student needs to be, then those scores can be reported at that time. That would be appropriate.
So I guess if that student who tests in developmental and decides to go into something, a level 1 certificate, our first success point for that student would be 15 hours.
Okay.
Is that right?
So you're just talking, no, because success points the success points, well, they tie to, and I want to make sure we get this right, so it's good that you're here. It's 15 hours in credit-bearing coursework.
Right. Yes, okay. That's what I'm saying.
So that if a student is taking, even if they haven't met TSI, but they're in a credit-bearing course,
right,
then those hours will count.
Gotcha. That's what I think we're saying, absolutely. The same thing.
They will count. I thought you were going to get to something about do you determine if they met TSI?
No.
Okay. So you could have a situation where a student comes in and their first time in college and they have a waiver and it's 4 years later when they meet TSI, but they don't enroll in a program where TSI is required for 2 years. We're not going to be able to capture them for those points. And that's where I thought you were going. But so there's some positive maybe there and some negative for students who take that route. But we will accumulate their hours and include them when they get to 15. Any other questions about the success? Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had one over
for
here.
For the purposes of success points, how do you define first-time undergraduate?
Do you want to second that?
Okay, first-time undergraduate is in the CBM 01, item 7, I think it is 000001.
But I do want to point out that in terms of what you report that first time in college flag. It's a first time transfer is what the item is called. And we actually, and this is actually important because sometimes if you're trying to match what you do, there are some things you can't because we have a flag that we generate after you report to us called first time undergraduate. And it's basically done in a similar way to how iPads does first time undergraduate. If a student was reported to us in the summer as first time in college, but then they're still enrolled with your institution in the fall, even if you don't capture them on that FTTR flag as first time in college in the fall, we'll take the fact that they were first time in college with you in the summer, and we'll create a flag in our fall files for that fiscal year saying this student was first time in college in the fall. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm sorry, Diane. Was that the question, the difference between FTIC and FTUG?
Yeah. And then we also, but to pick up spring, you use the 0001 in the that's how you get the spring first time in college. But we have a fall flag that we use, but they're both in there.
Right, and I don't know, we use FTUG in this chart, and maybe we need some clarity. So if the student is first time in college in the spring, we don't flag that. We use the fall numbers for our graduation rates, those type of things that are done just from fall. But we will capture from that FTIC flag, if it's the 501, we'll capture them as first time in college for success points. Thank you for adding that.
Could y'all also just do our iPad reports as well?
Yeah. I apologize that we,
and then there wouldn't be confusion about all the different numbers floating around.
If we had staff, well, we really do try to follow the iPads related to determining first time in college. And I will say this because it's come up again and it keeps coming up. Be sure that when you have those dual credit students who stay with you and are no longer dual credit, capture them as first time in college and you're reporting to us, or those usually very good students, some of your most advanced students, we won't be tracking them in terms of graduation rates and all of the data that we calculate from the first time in college flag. So very critical to make sure you make that transition for those dual credit students. Yes. The first college level course does not, it does not involve the first time in college or FTUG flag. Therefore, a dual credit student who's taking that course with you at your institution you will get a point for them completing the first college level course, if it's reported to us that they did so. Now, I think there were a lot of discussions about how to include dual credit students in the success points. We understand that's a very large part of your population, and I think generally most of the decisions for dual credit students were made so that dual credit students could be included. Obviously, when it comes to TSI, you should not have dual credit students taking dual credit in an area where they haven't met TSI. So the fact that we're using first time in college and dual credit has nothing to do with that measure, I think that's absolutely appropriate. But other than that, those students are enrolled with you, and if they, earn the hours and transfer, et cetera, they're included. Gabriella wants to add something.
Jack, Wardlaw sent a question regarding the period of reporting degrees that Don was talking about. We were not talking about the periods, Jack. It was more about 2 different years, actually. Because if it's awarded in summer 2012, that's fiscal year 12 reporting, and if it's awarded in November, December, it's fiscal year 13. So it's 1 year reporting, but when you look at it, they're 2 different fiscal years. I hope that answers your
That's
question.
the reason why I use those specific terms.
Yeah, I thought everyone understood that, but yes, it's. I think that's clear.
Any more questions about success points?
Points, or can we release Diane to head back to her her programming? Well, thank you very, very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Because he's right.
Oh, okay, yep.
At the beginning,
Okay.
no.
Oh, okay. Okay, there was a question about coordinating board groupings that Dwayne, who's here, asked. I don't know if you want to. You want to.
Your question out.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to answer it, and we'll see what other folks think.
Because it will be good a discussion with the others in the.
This is the one on success points?
No, it's the one about.
The accountability groupings.
Oh, the accountability
you all like
groupings.
Being
Okay.
able to send questions. While you're on that.
But you can hear, you can raise it.
Yeah.
No, I think it's a good question.
Colleges, are all grouped, and originally, several years ago, I don't know how many years ago it was, probably 8, 9, 10 years ago.
05, yeah.
Yeah, according to enrollment, but things have changed drastically since then, and I know for Navarre College, we're in the medium group, but we are as large as or larger than some of the large colleges out there. Makes it a little difficult for me to figure out, how I should compare myself. So perhaps it's time to reorganize those groups.
I welcome that comment. Many of you may be familiar with the fact that with the university accountability peer groups, this past March, we actually had that discussion about the peer group criteria for the university groups, and there's going to be our commissioner is going to make a recommendation. For them, obviously, there's some funding involved related to emerging research and all of that, so it's probably a little higher visibility issue. But I am glad you raised it because the group, my understanding of the groupings for community colleges, that the biggest piece had to do with the size of the institution in terms of the groupings. We have had some changes. Would you all like to discuss that topic? It's something we could either do right now and, bring to you a year from now, or if you think that's too long, we could do some work and maybe send you some possible proposals in the form of some kind of a survey, get your feedback, and make some changes in time for the next meeting. I think it's not so critical for coming together, since unlike at the beginning where you were tackling certain issues where you were meeting with your group, now we generally all come together. But it is important, I think, for those comparison purposes. And as I hear more and more folks come to me and saying they're using this peer group information for their boards and to, if they're doing dashboards, those type of things when they're using our data, it's very helpful if the groups are similar. And so that it makes sense for us to take the time to look at it. The other thing we could think about doing is have a structure where we say, these are the sizes, and as soon as someone moves into a different area, we will move them, the following, the subsequent year in accountability and regroup. I think it may take a bit of work to do that in the system. So it's not something I think we can finalize in November and then have it up and running when accountability happens in December. So it's either something I think we have to do some work on now and make decisions by summer. So when we put the changes into our IT department, they can include that in accountability, or we can do the legwork, and that could be the major discussion point for our meeting next spring.
Or we can just look what we did and told universities from the beginning. If somebody thinks they should move to another group, they should send us an a message, and we will look and discuss with that institution, and if they qualify for other group, we'll just change. So another way of doing with you would be pretty much the same. Like Dwayne feels like they should be moved. We can deal only with Navarro College without changing the whole structure or whatever. And if others feel the same way, that's fine. So dealing with one community college at a time instead of making a big change. But,
but
how would you prefer? Yeah. I mean, for us,
Yeah, I think either is fine. Or the idea of just coming up with some parameters. We would never move someone without asking them, but I don't know. When this was initially done,
we'll move everybody. Or maybe not, but
right.
It will be a bigger change, definitely.
Now, some of you have been here a long time, and you've got some history. Were there specific enrollment levels?
There were more. I mean,
just the general.
No, we had several versions of it, and I think the first version was based very much on locations. So, and that didn't work very well, and then we work with TAC. That's why it was a longer process that maybe you don't really want when we may look at one or two colleges. There were discussions regarding Dallas to put each college separately in a group, but the other very large colleges are, wait a minute, they are the only ones that I can compare with. So we want to keep the district together. So that's why I'm saying maybe we should start college by college if they're not. How many of you feel like their college should be in other groups?
Yeah, maybe a show of hands, since we don't have our e-poll functionality here, but a show of hands. Who thinks we should look at this for everybody, that the whole group should sort of consider the guidelines?
Kathy?
Okay, I see one person, and who thinks we should
She wants to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, you want to add something. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, they don't hear
you if they're not with us.
Turn it on. Oh.
I would try a different mic if you can find one.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah.
see, now I can tell it's working. Okay, I think it's worth opening the discussion. A few years back when the medium peer groups were meeting, something that came up often was some characteristics that people just felt like, I just can't compare myself to y'all because either I have a high percentage of dual credit or, for example, I found out recently at our college that we have the highest percentage of workforce students. So it's at least worth opening, I think, the discussion, surveying people maybe what they want to look at, or we're just happy, or, some people may not even use it. My concern is when others start using it and we're not comparable. I can come up with my own peer groups at my institution and use the system and share them with my institution and people that talk to us, but outside of us, I have no control of that. And if they're comparing us to people they really shouldn't be comparing us to, that's a problem.
Initially, we started with the Carnegie classification of community colleges. So that was the first try and the starting point. But at that time, it was new, just starting it. So I think it's better now. So we can start there again, where they look if it's rural or metropolitan or whatever, so location, size, they're all combined. So we can start over, but again, it's up to you how you want to do.
How about if we send out some kind of a survey? Does that make sense? And we'll let you give your feedback that way, and then we'll make a decision based on the results on whether this is something we save for next spring or we decide to do on a case-by-case basis. I'm seeing a lot, the most response I've had the whole time to that. So we'll go ahead and do that. We'll put something together and send it out and make some decisions. But I think it is true. It's been a long time, and it would be appropriate and to at least decide whether we want to stick with what we have or make a change.
If we change everything, then it will be next year.
Oh, yeah, if we're going to make a major change. Yeah, if we're going to make a major change. If we're going to do it case by case or just come up with some simple, we're going to base it on size and here are the new size guidelines, that we could do in a shorter amount of time. Okay, the last slide I have up, just thinking about success points, but this is, of course, translating to formula funding for the TSTCs. This is just... I didn't want to ignore our TSTCs because they have a very different funding model that's working its way through the legislature. I know John and Susan talked about that earlier in the meeting, so you got the update that this appears to be moving through. But here's a little bit of detail about that formula funding, that proposal. So I wanted to add that. Anything else before we move on related to success points or formula funding? Then I think I'm going to our outcomes-based funding. Critical fields review, I just wanted to let you know, and I think I mentioned this at TARE, so most of you probably do know. Now that we're getting close to the end of the Closing the Gaps plan, and now that critical fields seem to be popping up in more and more places and often tied to funding, we notice them in the success points linked to degrees in critical fields. They're in formula funding for universities, and our formula funding groups are going to be convening like late summer, early fall. It was decided that it's time for us to look at critical fields again, and I have, I guess, been given the responsibility of coordinating that effort, at least for the time being. This is a new area for me, but I've been working with Paul Turcotte in our finance planning section because it really does tie to formula funding in some ways, but critical fields are also important for overall planning. They played a role in our Closing the Gaps plan, understanding, because really incentives can be tied, whether it's monetary incentives or by making certain areas very visible, by designing accountability measures or other goals, planning goals around critical fields. It can really make a difference in terms of the attention that they're given, the effort that's put into bringing students there. I think it's helpful for institutions to know that a large or that a statewide effort was made to look at fields and where we think there's going to be a need. So this is coming. We've got a letter that we're going to be sending to the president asking for nominees to be on a critical fields work group. We are working on finalizing a definition for Texas critical fields, possibly some charges, at least, that could be sent with that to just to have a place to start, because a definition for critical fields that's used by Texas for the purposes I just talked about, for the statewide planning purposes and formula funding, is going to be different than a definition for critical fields that might be used for other uses. So we're working on that. Right now we're thinking one work group. It could be a group that splits up. In talking with the health-related institutions yesterday at their accountability meeting, their concern is you've got lots of different institution types, you've got lots of different degree levels, you've got also lots of different program areas, and do you think about it in terms of the areas at different levels, or in terms of having a discussion, with the two-year colleges and the universities and the health-related separately? So, there's a lot of complication, but right now we're looking hopefully at one work group in terms of the resources we have available and the time we have available. We think that makes the most sense. We really want to pull in people from the community. We think it's important for this work group to have balance and to have feedback from the business community, from folks who are involved in the different professional groups that might be identified as critical fields. So if you have any ideas for individuals or organizations that we should be tapping into or thinking about tapping into for nominees, please feel free to give them to me. We did get a couple ideas yesterday from the HRI group. And don't be surprised that there will be, when you hear that there's been some kind of a letter related to critical fields. That's what it's all about, is sitting down and updating those critical fields. And we hope that we can come up with some kind of methodology that maybe we can every 5 years reuse, so it doesn't become a 15-year span the next time, like it was this time with looking at critical fields. So that's just a little update on what we're doing there, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot. In terms of the first college level course, I want to introduce Jenna Cossert, who many of you got a chance to meet at TARE. And Jana is now she's a program director in the planning section, and she is working directly with the developmental education data. And she's actually, I want to say she's developed some wonderful mechanisms and databases for pulling information about TSI-related metrics out of your reports and pulling them into a spreadsheet so she can analyze exactly why numbers for different years might not be what you'd expect they should be, what happened, why there's differences. So,
and sometimes we can actually see something out of all of that.
Yeah. No, it's actually been very useful because those are complicated reports, and often you see numbers and think, oh, this doesn't look right, but I don't know what happened. I don't know what we did with reporting. That led to this result. So I wanted to let you know that we're very happy to have her with us for that reason. But another assignment that she's been giving that obviously relates to TSI is to look at the first college level courses. She's been pulling a lot of data related to that, and she is in the beginning stages of, or we've certainly met internally, but we're in the beginning stages of thinking about a work group to have some guidelines for those. So she just wanted to say a couple of words about that process.
Yeah, so we'll be setting up a work group, and this will be the first work group I get to coordinate. So I'd welcome if there are any thoughts, or, when from an initial look at the data, we find some variance in the math courses, but quite a bit in the reading and writing across the state. So some institutions have very narrow definitions of what counts as a first college level course in reading, and some have very, very broad. And so are there any thoughts, especially because it's going to be related to success points, at least something that we should look at? So do you think guidelines are something we should explore?
Yeah. Okay. And at this point in time, I think we're just thinking of them as guidelines. But as you know, sometimes when you have guidelines, they turn into something more prescriptive. But right now, we're just talking about guidelines. Yes.
Didn't the previous 002 used to list courses in there for the C or better?
Back in the old task days.
Good while
never under TSI, but back in the old task days.
There used to be courses that were considered.
There was a list, and now there's also. Right now, I think in the proposed new TSI rules, and this is separate from this issue, though I can see people thinking about it that way, I believe there's some kind of a list related to fresh entry-level courses. So generally, the first course that a student would take, where a student met TSI, that would be a course that they'd be allowed to go into without having to meet any other kind of qualifications, prerequisites. So there will be a list there, but that is not the same as this, so I'm glad you mentioned that. But there was an old list with TASP. Some people still use it. There are some institutions who, will talk, well, I just used the list. Some institutions, I think lots of institutions have gotten their faculty get together, and they've really spent a lot of time digging through this. One of the biggest challenges with this is that courses are different on different campuses. So there might be one campus that has an entry-level history course that requires several papers. And there might be another campus that has an entry-level history course where it's mostly multiple-choice exams. And so for the campus where it's mostly multiple-choice exams to say this is the first college-level writing course, well, that's not appropriate. But for the campus where there's a lot of papers being written in that class, it might be appropriate for them to say, hey, we require a lot of writing. And, now that we have learning objectives, I think that can help with this discussion because maybe we don't have quite as much variability, but we understand that it's a challenging question, which is why we'd like to have a work group come together. Maybe at least there could be some decisions made about what's appropriate. Right now we see some science courses showing up in the first college level reading, and there are arguments both ways for that. Yes. Yeah. So whether or not the students met the objectives in that class, okay, and then use that to, I'm sorry, I'm not quite following the end result. So if the students are meeting the objectives, then it would be a first college level course in that. Oh yeah, could you, I'm sorry, you're not on the microphone.
Do you mind turning on the microphone?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Compare that to success.
and grades. That's what we do.
Okay. Yeah, why don't you start over, because I think so. You, for the first college level course, what you would do then to determine what they should be?
We look at the learning objectives and see if the students met each objective. We compare that to the success of the class, and see if there's a correlation.
And then if there is, you would decide every student taking that class, whatever grade, as long as they pass with an A, B, or C.
Well, we
because
find
that's how we determine it. Then
a
it
lack
would
of
be.
correlation is what we find. Sorry.
Okay.
And we can ask the question, why is the students so successful and yet they're not meeting objectives?
Okay.
If a course has been approved by the coordinating board to be part of the core curriculum, why wouldn't any of those courses that are by nature, by design, first level college courses suffice for like reading?
Well, I think a core course is different than a first college level course, because you have some core math courses. You know, you have some. Not every category might fit. Like a foreign language course, for example, could be a core course, but would you consider that a first college level reading course if you're talking about a student saying once a student meets TSI in English, then we're going to track and see if they're successful. And one thing we need to, I think, keep coming back to is the reason we have this designation, what it's for, and it's for our accountability measure, where we want to see if once students have met TSI or students coming in with TSI, have they, when they've gotten into that first college level course, have they been successful? Have they been able to successfully complete that? Does
What
that
I'm
make
saying,
sense?
if you've identified a group of courses that suffice for one, why couldn't that, with common sense guidelines, for example, you wouldn't necessarily use a reading, or even though there's a lot of reading in a math course,
right,
you wouldn't necessarily use that to suffice for reading.
Exactly.
But history, just about any, psychology, sociology, just about any course they're going to take that doesn't require prerequisite otherwise are going to require a lot of reading. I've never taken a college course that didn't. So, but I was saying, if you have one approved group of courses, why designate a different group of courses that will suffice for even though, albeit a different reason?
Well, it's for a different reason, yeah. It is a different reason and different purpose. And I think this is exactly the kind of discussion that we want the work group to have. So I'm glad you're bringing that up, because there could be a place for what's been done with core or what's been done with learning outcomes in this discussion. And we didn't have this before. You know, when TSI went through and that measure was developed when we first started the accountability system, and that measure of tracking first college level course success came through, we didn't have learning outcomes. The core was, you know, there was more variability across institutions. So absolutely, I think that there's a place in this discussion for learning outcomes and core, and how does that and should that tie in? So we will be putting together a work group, and it sounds like, you know, this the type of thing you're all thinking about, and we'll hopefully be able to come up with some guidelines, because I think in terms of wanting parity across institutions, especially if success points come through, because when this is first developed, also there wasn't, and we still don't know, as you know, that funding will be tied to it, but as I was saying before about data down the line, it might be, even if it isn't right now, that it's important that in terms of what's being reported to us, there's some kind of consistency, or you really are having institutions, you know, it doesn't tell us much if institutions are defining them in very different ways. Make sense? So I think everyone's on board with that. So we wanted to let you know we're on that. And did you have something else you wanted to add, or is that? You sure? Okay. No, all those things are important. If there's anything else we should be thinking about, also, please let us know.
No, Julie, Don Perry, Dallas. You have a lot of institutions across the state that are achieving the dream institutions, Texas Complete Project institutions, and so you might want to make sure that when you put the call out that somehow or another those institutions are enlisted for nominations as well.
Okay.
And the match that you were just talking about with the learning outcomes, it would seem to me that once we finally get to some of these guidelines or definitions, that when courses go up before the ACGM committee for review, that some of those guidelines need to be a part of looking at those specific outcomes.
Thank you. And the other thing that we'll do is we'll make sure to include folks from the Workforce and Academic Affairs Division, because they have an understanding of what some of the curricular content areas more than we folks do in accountability, which might be part of why, if I'm not fully understanding your comments, that could be part of the reason. So we'll make sure we have those folks with the curricular expertise involved in this committee. And internally, as we've been meeting and looking at the data, we've also been including them because they often have a reason for why certain courses might be there or might not be there. TSI update, I'm going to keep this very short, but I want you to know that at the coordinating board meeting on April 25th, our board will be voting on the TSI assessment standards. Most of you may be aware that it was brought before our cause committee. I'm not sure I'm going to get the acronym right, but the P16 committee. And at the end of March, a presentation was made about the standard setting process and what the recommendations were. And right now we're looking at a score range of 310 to 390, I think, in math, reading, and writing for the TSI assessment. It's not the same thing as the AccuPlacer, and I think I have had some of those questions come in. It was a test that was developed for Texas based on the college and career readiness standards. However, it is the College Board that got the contract to develop it, and so some of the things I think you can go on through AccuPlacer and on that website and select the Texas Success Initiative assessment to get to some of the information about that assessment. So it is a separate assessment, but it was developed by the College Board, so that might be why you've heard some comparisons with AccuPlacer. So by now, I hope you're all aware that this is the test as of the first class day. If students haven't tested yet for TSI purposes, it's one test that's going to be used. We're going to still have our exemption tests. Rules are in process right now and should be in the Texas Register in May, which will have those standards and have information about the exemption standards, which, and there could be changes, so I don't want to say what it's going to be, but, I don't think you're going to see anything in terms of the exemptions that's too different. However, we now have the end of course tests. We don't know exactly what's happening with that, which is another reason why, in terms of the exemption, we don't know exactly where that's going to go. But there will be a means for students to exempt the TSI. Those students, by law, will not be able to be required to take DE for those entry-level courses, first college-level courses. And then for, or I should say entry-level, keep our definitions separate. And then for the students have to take the TSI assessment. If they meet the standards, those students cannot be required to take developmental education. There's a lot going on with pre-assessment activities that are in the rules now, or I think that's in the current rule, but it's not implemented until I think this summer. A lot of changes. They've been doing webinars in the P16 division. There's one coming up on April 26th, and that's pretty much to talk about the standard, what's the standard's going to be, because by then the board will have voted and it will be finalized. So you might want to let folks at your institutions know about that. In terms of reporting officials and IR folks, there's probably a lot of manuals that need to be changed on your end, course information. We are going to be changing the CBM 002, of course, because of this, and I've said all along that we have worked very hard to keep those changes minimal, or to try to keep those changes minimal. And one reason we've got a score range that's 3 digits is because we can fit that in without adding spaces. So although you are going to have probably changes to the do coming in terms of having room to report those, well, actually, no, I don't think there is anywhere where we report semester credit hours anymore on the 2. So the 2 changes are just going to be adding the new test to the list of test options. So that's just going to be adding an option, not a new item, and then adding and the way it's set up is so that you'll be able to use that place for reporting a score. Once you tell us it's the TSI assessment, you can report the score in exactly the same place that you reported the score, whether it was the AccuPlacer or the Compass or the ACID. We have it set up to do that. So we're going to have a lot of changes in the language. We'll have to go in and put new rules in and explain what the standards are for students coming in at this point or that point, but there's not going to be too much otherwise. So we're trying to keep that easy for all of you. But you're going to have work in terms of your a lot of your publications and what's on your website for what students need to do, and there'll probably be some confusion. So I hope it's helped all the webinars that the P16 folks have done. Are there any questions related to that may be related to IR or reporting that I can help with? Yes.
Just one, Julie. Don Perry from Dallas. When the coordinating board receives this information on the 25th, that's for the college-ready cut scores. Will we know that day as well what the cut scores have been selected for distinguishing between ABE and developmental?
I cannot answer that question because I'm not sure if we will, because there's been some different discussion around that, and I don't know if you listened in on the board meeting. I think it's, there definitely will be the cut scores established for the college ready, and I think there's an understanding that there's a need to have a plan in place for those ABE, those students who are determined to be at the ABE level. So what the decision is made, whether it's made, to wait in terms of setting the cut score related to the plan, I'm not sure. And I think they're going to be talking more at the board meeting about that. So it would be worth listening in to get that information. That's correct. Well, there was a standard setting process that occurred for that test, and there were faculty members from around the state involved in that standard setting process. They reviewed items. They used the bookmarking technique. I'm sorry, I can't see you around the pole here. And again, I don't want to get into a lot of detail about it, but it's my understanding that this is a standard that is more rigorous. It's based on the college and career readiness standards. There is going to be a phase-in, however, and there's going to be information presented at the board meeting. So again, I'm not an expert. I just wanted to let you know that it's going to be decided, and you should be aware of information. They presented a slideshow at the committee meeting, and it may also, I think they're also going to be presenting some slides of PowerPoint at the board meeting, showing some of the work that was done, and some information we provided about percentages of students who meet exemption standards, but they also have information from the work that was done in standard setting that the College Board did, and some of the field testing that was done and all of that in terms of the expectations for students meeting the standard. And because I think it's a rigorous one, there's a phase-in that is most likely going to be involved. So I'll again encourage you to listen to the board meeting presentation, and also there's the webinar the following day that our P16 division will be presenting, and they'll be able to answer questions from the field. Yes?
Just with Billy Ressler, North Central Texas College, with it being more rigorous, as stated, do we expect changes in the exemptions, like the SAT score cutoff, if that's that level?
Well, in terms of the exemptions, we still have tax, but last year was the last year that, I believe, if I got this correct, or this year actually will be the last year that juniors take the tax, and then the current sophomores and students who are younger fall under the end of course assessments under STAR. And if you've been following the sort of K-12 issues at the legislature, you know there's some bills that might affect that testing. And by law, there's right now supposed to be an exemption standard for TSI on the Algebra 2 and the English 3. And the two commissioners got together, and I believe that standard was determined. And that was not a phase-in standard. That was a standard that's set for now. One thing about what's in current law related to the new testing is that the agencies are asked to go back and look and see if these standards are working effectively. Because until you actually get students in who are motivated taking these tests, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what it's going to look like in terms of student performance. So that's a piece of it in terms of exemption. Right now, most of the exemptions we see in our data are for tax. Most schools, most kids are coming in from public high schools. They just report the tax exemption. We don't see too much ACT or SAT. We have looked at data, and we rarely see students with ACT or SAT exemptions being placed in DevEd, with the exemptions where they are now. So I just wanted to mention that. So, but that has been part of the process to look at that. I believe there's a study that's going to be done. And again, I didn't want to get into detail. Suzanne Morales-Vale couldn't be with us today. She had to be at another meeting, or she'd be able to answer some of these more specific questions. But again, wanted to give you the update. And we understand that, dual credit permission standards, when the tax goes away, we're not going to have those. And that's an issue. So we're aware of that as well. And all of this is linked together. But we're pleased at least that we're at the point where we will, in another 2 weeks, you should have a standard. So I know you all encouraged us to get that to you so you can move forward and start changing your course catalogs and your other information. Okay, so that's what I had for TSI. New data reports and applications. There's really just a couple things I wanted to show you. I'll do it quickly, and then I think we're going to end up just about on time, which is good. So what I want to show you is something called a new application we have for tracking. It's called Tracking Post-Secondary Outcomes, but it's really designed to track high school students into higher ed. And hold on. It's over here under our High School to College. It's very, very recently been posted, and basically we took information that we are already provided about students, the students we track from public ISDs into higher ed, and we put it in a format it's a dashboard format, and I think it's easier to use for folks in the field, especially for example, trustees at an ISD or maybe your admissions folks who want to see what information about a certain ISD. So what we have here is we have the ability to go in and pull information about districts. And we have information about TSI readiness. We have information about the students who are in that district. There we go. We have information about their enrollment in higher education, what type of institution students are enrolling in, enrollment status, whether it's full-time or part-time, the ethnic breakdowns of those students who are enrolled, gender. We have their economic status. So lots of information about what students are doing by specific ISD. A lot of this, as you know, is information that we have provided for years. There are a few new components, or we've shown things a little bit differently, but we think it's very useful to have it all in one place. So if you are interested in students from a particular ISD or a particular region, you don't have to go into 5 different reports to find out what's happening to those students in terms of enrollment in higher education.
Drill down to high schools?
It does not drill down to high school. One of the reasons for that is because FERPA, and especially with things like TSI information, it's just too challenging for us, and so much would be masked. We do drill down to high school, as you know, in our basic high school to college reports that I mentioned that we just posted the new one, so that is by high school. But this information we've got by region, we've got it by district. You can compare districts, and again, and also you can look across years. It's longitudinal, but if you want that very specific by high school information, you can go right into the that high school to college enrollment data that we post. Yes.
I had a question in reference to one of the drop-down options. I believe it's the college readiness option.
Okay, yes.
When you go to that option, the selection criteria, no, maybe not that one.
Okay.
Let's try persistence. Maybe it's that one.
Okay.
There's one that has multiple selection. That one.
Okay.
Yeah. See,
okay.
There's persistence, high school graduation year, and then continuous enrollment.
Okay, and this is actually one of the new pieces that we haven't shown before. All the other stuff we had, but this is actually something that's new. We look at the persistence of students who come by ISD, of students who enroll in higher education, and then we have it over time. So and I think this is a really key piece because, in the past, high schools could look and say, hey, look at what a high percentage of my students are enrolling in college. But being able to look and see how many are still there a year later is really a key, I think, because I think a lot of students, especially underprepared students, will enroll and then will not persist. So I think this is very useful new information that we include. So I'm glad you pointed that out. And again, it's quite new. I haven't had as much time to play around in it as I'd like, but we do have a lot of, I think, very, very useful information here. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And then just briefly, I wanted to let you know that we do have some distance education data available now that we didn't have before. I think I have to, go back in here. So you can find distance education data now under our higher education topics, and here it is, participation. We've got some new information there. It also has information about students in traditional face-to-face on-campus courses if you're just looking for numbers. So it's got some nice breakouts by mode and location. So think about those mode and location elements that we collect on the 001. And then the enrollment forecast is here. So wanted to point that out. We talked about the accountability changes earlier, and so I think those are the new things. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that I said the almanac was going to be coming out in a week or so, but we're also going to have a mobile device-ready application that's going to have almanac data in it, and it's going to be called Compare College Texas. There's a main website that will be behind it, but it's basically designed so that you can go on your mobile device and pull up data to compare colleges, the data that is in the almanac, but by college. And it's designed, I think it'd be useful for IR people, of course, if you just want to pull up something quickly if you're at a meeting. But it's designed for students or parents. You can picture a student on a college campus tour and wanting to say, oh, I wonder if there's other places, that look similar to this, or I wonder what the graduation rate is of students at this school. So it's got that information in what we hope is a user-friendly format, and we're excited to have that come out sometime later this month. Yes, Martha?
Your top tweet.
Yes.
College Town Hall is the
Yay! Thank you. I knew it was coming soon, so it is now out. So the copy that I have in my office, I now don't have to hide anymore. We got the boxes last week, but it wasn't official yet. Thank you very much. So the almanac is out, and we'll put the new one up. We'll put a link to it. Obviously, there's a main link not on our data page, but we'll put the link to it, to the new one here where we had the old link, and we'll put the new picture in. That'll just take a couple days. Well, that's exciting. Thank you. And thank you all again for the work you did to review the data. Did you all appreciate that opportunity, or were you frustrated to have one more thing hit your desk? You were okay? All right, any final parting comments? We've certainly had a lot of information covered today. Thank you all very, very much for coming. We appreciate your making the effort to be here.